Chapter 81. Black Widow didn't come for revenge. On the contrary, she came to deliver a message. I heard that Tiger Liu will send a group of subordinates to deal with you tonight. If you believe me, please leave here as soon as possible. After saying this, Black Widow left in a hurry. Lin Sun was in a daze. He closed the door and said with a little emotion, "This woman is grateful. Unfortunately, she became an assassin." Xia Ji said seriously, "It seems that yesterday's failure didn't make them restrain themselves. Instead, it made them more determined to eradicate us." Lin Sun became serious and frowned. "I just wonder who Tiger Liu is." "I know," Xia Ji said casually. "This guy is one of the few strong practitioners in the gang spirit realm in the civilian area. He is also the leader of the largest gang in the civilian area, the Black Tiger Gang. There are thousands of gang members under his command, among which there are more than 300 practitioners." She took a sip of tea and continued, "I planned to annex the Black Tiger Gang after a while, but I didn't expect that they came to me voluntarily." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. "I see. In order to deal with us, the clan of Wu invited a gang leader in the gang spirit realm. They really think highly of us." Xia Ji said disdainfully, "Tiger Liu is nothing. I heard that he broke through the gang spirit realm in his 50s, which shows how poor his aptitude for cultivation is. He always values money more than his life. It's not surprising that the clan of Wu asked him to do this." For the first time, Lin Sun found that Xia Ji's original decision didn't seem to be a mistake. She integrated the Shuangmu gang and annexed the two nearby gangs. What she got was not only rich trophies, but also various related intelligence. These intelligence let Lin Sun know the specific power of the clan of Wu in the shortest time. And it was also the intelligence that made Xia Ji reveal the details of Tiger Liu at the first time. "Do you believe the news of Black Widow?" Lin Sun asked. Xia Ji stood up and said, "I'll send someone to check Tiger Liu's territory, and then we'll know whether the news is true or not." Saying this, she walked out of the courtyard. Just 30 minutes later, Xia Ji came back and confirmed that the news was true. Tiger Liu was mobilizing people. Obviously, he was going to make a big move. Anyone who was not blind could see it. Knowing all this, Lin Sun said, "It seems that if we don't leave this place as soon as possible, there will be a fierce battle tonight." Summer Solstice asked, "Are you afraid?" A killing intent surged in Lin Sun's black eyes. "I've been attacked one after another. If I don't fight back, I'll look too useless." Xia Ji nodded and said, "I think so too." In the evening, Lin Sun was ready. He was still dressed in a coarse hemp robe, but there was more to it than meets the eye. Firstly, he wore a pair of dark gray-colored pauldrons on his shoulders, and it was called Cloud Mountain. The fifth Earth Spirit marking pattern was inscribed on it, and it possessed an extremely excellent defensive ability. A pair of green wrist guards were attached to his wrists. They were called Army Breaker and were engraved with Vast Flow spiritual tattoo. Not only could they protect the wrists, but when used with weapons, they could also effectively mobilize the spiritual power in the body and increase the power of the release of spiritual power. On his upper body, he wore a layer of soft armor called Overlapping Scales, which was covered with layers of fine iron. Together with the 1,000 Vortex spiritual tattoo, it could absorb and dissolve the opponent's attack power. It was also a defensive spiritual weapon. On his feet, he wore a pair of Flying Spirit boots, which was engraved with Strong Wind spiritual tattoo, which could enhance the agility and speed of body movements. In addition, Lin Sun also carried a big bow, which was black and rough. The bow body was smelted from more than 10 kinds of metals, and the bowstring was tanned from the spine tendons of the spike-tailed mammoth. This bow was called Spiritual Arm, and it was engraved with gold-splitting spiritual tattoo. In addition, there were 30 scorching arrows inscribed with explosive flame spiritual tattoo, hidden in Lin Sun's storage ring. There was also a flaming spirit saber on Lin Sun's waist. These were all standard spiritual weapons, which were extremely common in the market. But since they were spiritual weapons, their value was naturally high. But Lin Sun was different. These spiritual weapons were all personally refined by him in the past 10 days, and he only consumed a lot of ordinary weapons and spiritual ink without spending any money. It was worth mentioning that Lin Sun only failed once when refining these equipment, and the reason for the failure was that a mouse suddenly ran into the room at that time, distracting Lin Sun, which led to a slight mistake when inscribing the spiritual tattoos. Anyway, if other spiritual tattooists knew such a near-perfect success rate, they would definitely go crazy. But for Lin Sun, he had been used to it, so he didn't feel much surprise. Under the setting sun, Lin Sun was ready to go and armed himself to the extreme. Xia Ji, on the other hand, was much simpler. She still carried the white bone spear and wore a black windbreaker, with a hat covering her beautiful and fair face. "Let's go." Lin Sun took a deep breath and walked out. "Wait, someone is coming." Xia Ji frowned, and her ethereal voice was filled with a hint of killing intent. Walking in the narrow and dark alley, Gu Liang was a little annoyed. A few days ago, his father Gu Yinping asked him to find the child who sold the flaming spirit saber. He thought it would be easy to find him, but he didn't expect that he found nothing after running all over the prosperous areas of Donglin Town these days. It was normal that Gu Liang didn't dare to ask for help, because he knew that all the major businesses in Donglin Town had been keeping an eye on the movements of Golden Hall. Even Xiao Yuanzhong, the shopkeeper of Treasure House, directly spread the news that he wanted to dig out the mysterious spiritual tattooist at a high price. Under such circumstances, Gu Liang was sure that the eyes of many spies in the town were focused on Golden Hall, because only Golden Hall knew who made the flaming spirit saber. Therefore, Gu Liang was extremely careful every time he went out to avoid being followed. But unfortunately, it was not until today that he finally realized that his way of finding the person was wrong. Thanks to his father's reminder, Lin Sun was only wearing the most common coarse linen clothes at that time, which showed that he was obviously not from a rich family. Moreover, as a practitioner, Lin Sun didn't hesitate to sell a flaming spirit saber in exchange for money, which showed that his life must be a little poor. Inferring from these details, Lin Sun should live in the civilian area instead of the prosperous area of the town. Sure enough, Gu Liang soon inquired about Courtyard 49 in the depths of an alley in the civilian area, according to his father's inference. A new tenant, a teenager, had moved in. This confirmed Gu Liang's thoughts one by one. Similarly, this was also the reason why Gu Liang was annoyed. If he paid more attention to some details, how could these days' efforts be in vain? Soon, Gu Liang dispelled his annoyance. Seeing Courtyard 49, he immediately went forward and knocked on the door. The door was opened, revealing a familiar face, which made Gu Liang excited. Sure enough, he came to the right place. "I'm Gu Liang, and the shopkeeper of Golden Hall is my father." "Nice to meet you, child." Gu Liang saluted. Lin Sun was stunned. He didn't expect that the son of the shopkeeper of Golden Hall would come to him at this time. Immediately, he understood Gu Liang's intention and said, "Your Excellency, are you here to buy a spiritual weapon?" Gu Liang was also stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Lin Sun to be so direct. Then he smiled calmly and said, "Child, you have sharp eye. I'm here for this purpose at the request of my father." Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "Not now. I have something urgent to deal with today. How about I go to Golden Hall in person another day?" Gu Liang finally found Lin Sun. How could he be willing to leave? He said, "Well, how about I stay here and wait for you to come back?" Lin Sun frowned and said, "I advise you to leave as soon as possible. It won't be long before there are many changes here, and I'm afraid you'll be killed." Gu Liang was shocked. Seeing that Lin Sun didn't seem to be joking, he thought for a long time and finally nodded. "In that case, I'll come again tomorrow." After that, he turned around and left. Almost at the same time as he left, Lin Sun closed the gate and jumped out of the wall behind the yard with Xia Ji. They walked quickly along an alley and soon disappeared. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. The setting sun was like fire and blood. A flock of crows were cawing in the air, which was harsh and horrifying. When the night was about to fall, the vicinity of Courtyard 49 was deserted. Even the barking of stray cats and dogs had disappeared. Only the cold wind, as sharp as a knife, made a whining sound in the air, as if weeping and complaining. It wasn't long before this deathly silent and oppressive atmosphere was broken by a wave of footsteps. If one were to look down from the sky, one would be able to see a dense expanse of figures surging over from all directions like tidewater and converging towards Courtyard 49. There were many of them, and every one of them was dressed in martial attire. Their expressions were fierce, and there were at least 500 to 600 of them. If there were experienced people here, they would be able to see that there were many cultivators among these people. Needless to say, they were all members of Black Tiger Gang. When the night came and darkness covered the sky of Courtyard 49, Tiger Liu appeared there at the same time. Although Tiger Liu was in his 60s, he was burly and strong. His long gray hair was meticulously combed. There were many scars on his face, which made him look extremely ferocious. His light brown eyes were as fierce and cunning as a wolf's. Among the underground forces in the civilian area, Black Tiger Gang was the most powerful. In the Black Tiger Gang, Tiger Liu had the highest status. In the eyes of many people, Tiger Liu could even be called the underground king of the civilian area. At this time, Tiger Liu, with his hands behind his back, looked at the closed gate of Courtyard 49, and a cold curve appeared at the corner of his mouth. This time, someone sent him a good spiritual weapon and a large sum of 1,000 silver coins, intending to let him kill a teenager named Lin Sun. Tiger Liu agreed without hesitation. But he was not stupid. Since the other side paid such a huge price, it showed that the target must be difficult to deal with. Therefore, he not only came in person, but also brought 500 gang members. Tiger Liu believed that with such a force, it was enough to wipe out the entire civilian area, and it should be more than enough to deal with a teenager. Grandmaster, the nearby brothers, sent the news that the target didn't go out today and must still be at home at this time. A spy came forward and reported quickly. Tiger Liu nodded and waved his hand. "Do it." The cold and austere voice was like a signal, opening the curtains of the battle in this dark night. P.S. Thanks to Crazy Tsunami, Dark Knight Carnival, and my old brothers Peach Blossom and Qingdong for their support and votes. Next update, 4:30. Chapter 82. Boom. The closed door was blasted open, and a group of ferocious men from Black Tiger Gang rushed in. At the same time, hundreds of people separated and completely blocked the entire Courtyard 49. Not to mention people, even a fly couldn't fly out. Seeing this, Tiger Liu couldn't help but nod with satisfaction. His subordinates were all elites of the gang, shrewd, and neat. Tiger Liu didn't rush in. Although the target was just a teenager, he was very clear that the employer paid a spiritual weapon and 1,000 silver coins, which proved that the teenager was absolutely not easy to deal with. Under such circumstances, Tiger Liu naturally wouldn't take risks before he figured out the situation. Time passed little by little. Tiger Liu suddenly frowned. His subordinates had rushed into the target's house, but there was no sound of fighting until now. Was there an accident? Just as this thought came to Tiger Liu's mind, a subordinate hurried to report. "Grandmaster, the target is not at home." Tiger Liu's face darkened. "Have you searched everywhere?" The subordinate said indignantly. "We've searched everywhere, but we couldn't even find a single copper coin, let alone a person. I think the target has already smelled the news and fled early when he saw the situation was not good." At this time, those who rushed into Courtyard 49 had returned, their faces full of disappointment. Seeing this, Tiger Liu suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He said in a cold voice, "A group of useless trash. Go and kill all the spies stalking here. How dare they ruin my plan?" Yes. Immediately, more than a dozen strong men took the order and left. "Grandmaster, it seems that the target has indeed fled early. This time we will return without accomplishing anything." Someone sighed. Tiger Liu's face was as gloomy as water. He came here with a murderous look, but he didn't catch the target. He was quite aggrieved. Should he admit his failure like this? Tiger Liu was extremely unwilling. "Grandmaster, bad news. Bad news." Suddenly, a panicked voice sounded from a distance. A spy almost stumbled over, causing a lot of people present to be agitated. The target had already fled. Could there be worse news? Tiger Liu was inexplicably angry. He kicked the spy and scolded, "Don't be so flustered. Are you King here to deliver news or to announce the death?" The spy rolled on the ground in pain and wailed, "Gang leader, it's really bad." Tiger Liu was so angry that he wanted to chop this coward. He gritted his teeth and said, "Tell me what's wrong with you. Do you really want me to kill you?" The scout had a long face and said with a trembling voice, Our base has been attacked." "What?" As if struck by lightning, Tiger Liu's face changed dramatically. The expressions of the other gang members present changed abruptly, and a thought surged into their hearts in unison. Someone actually dared to take advantage of the situation? In this civilian district, who had eaten the heart of a bear and the heart of a leopard, and dared to move against the Black Tiger gang? Damn it. Looks like someone is tired of living. They want to take advantage of us while we are out of our nest. Could it be Humanzi from the Azure Bamboo gang? This guy has always been against our Black Tiger gang. Maybe it's really him this time. Damn it, this Humanzi is courting death. A wave of angry curses rang out, and the place was in a mess. At this moment, it was revealed that these gangsters were a bunch of bandits who could not be seen in public. They were far from being comparable to the strict military discipline of the army. They could only be described as a motley crew. "Shut up, all of you." Suddenly, a thunderous roar sounded, shocking all the people present. Tiger Liu's face was ferocious and full of killing intent. He gritted his teeth and said, "What the fuck is the situation now? Why don't you hurry back with me to kill the enemy? Do you have to wait until the base is completely destroyed?" Everyone suddenly woke up as if waking up from a dream. Back to the time when Tiger Liu led his subordinates to Courtyard 49 in a spacious area in the southwest of the civilian district. There was a magnificent building here, like a castle rising from the ground. Compared with the narrow and dilapidated houses nearby, it was like a crane in a flock of chickens. This was the base of the Black Tiger gang. In the past, ordinary people did not dare to come here. It was late, but the Black Tiger gang was brightly lit as if it were daytime. Although Tiger Liu took 500 gang members away, there were still hundreds of people guarding the base. On a house opposite, Lin Sun hid carefully. Looking at the base of the Black Tiger gang dozens of meters away, he whispered, "Have you hidden all the valuable things in your house?" "Yes." Xia Ji's voice sounded in the darkness, ethereal and ethereal. Even with Lin's soul power, he could not perceive her specific position. Such a way of concealing one's breath and shadow was amazing. Lin even had a feeling that Xia Ji was born to belong to the darkness, illusory and elusive. "We don't have much time. It's time to act," Xia Ji reminded. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and a killing intent flashed in his black eyes. He said, "Let's start." Swish! Before his voice died away, he took off the spiritual arm bow, squatted, and took a wrong step. Exerting strength in his arms, he pulled the bow like a full moon. A scorching sun arrow tore the air like lightning and suddenly shot out. The whole movement was as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water. In an instant, in the base of the Black Tiger gang, dozens of meters away, a guard standing guard in front of the window on the second floor fell down and died on the spot, as if struck by lightning. At the same time, with a boom, a ball of raging fire exploded in that position, burning fiercely. This was the power of the explosion after the scorching sun arrow was triggered. The flame could cover an area of 30 meters, which was extremely vicious. The fire rushed up, causing a lot of exclamations. The guards distributed in the base of the Black Tiger gang were all alarmed, causing an uproar. On the top of a house in the distance, Lin Sun looked calm. After shooting the first arrow, he didn't stop. Looking for opportunities, he quickly shot more than 10 arrows. Bang, bang, bang. The scorching sun arrows, like meteors tearing the night, drew different trajectories with ear-piercing screeches and instantly disappeared into the base of the Black Tiger gang. The base was in chaos. Many figures ran around like headless flies. Obviously, without Tiger Liu, they became leaderless and at a loss. This gave Lin Sun the best hunting opportunity. The scorching sun arrows fell one after another, producing thunderous explosions. Each arrow would kill one person, and the raging, scorching sun swept and raged. In the blink of an eye, the base of the Black Tiger Gang seemed to have turned into a sea of fire. Screams, roars, and the sound of raging flames were everywhere. Most of the members of the Black Tiger Gang were ordinary people, and only a small part of them were practitioners. In addition, Tiger Liu went out with the elites of the gang, which made the base extremely fragile. Just one round of arrows was enough to make them flee in panic. However, there was still a small group of practitioners who remained calm. It was obvious that they had encountered an enemy attack. These Shouja had hidden themselves and were waiting to attack. They knew very well that as long as they held on for a while, Tiger Liu would inevitably return after hearing the news. At that time, no matter how many enemies came, they would suffer the cruelest blow. Listen, be careful to hide. Kill any intruders without mercy. A burly, bearded, middle-aged man shouted in a low voice. With his bulging muscles, he stood behind a huge stone pillar like an iron tower with two axes in his hands. From this position, he could see the main gate. The main gate was raging with flames dancing in the air. Before long, a small and delicate black figure walked out of the flames. She held a white-boned spear and wore a black windbreaker. The brim of her hat covered most of her face, revealing only a small section of her delicate white chin. In the night of the flowing flames, she looked extremely mysterious. A little girl? The burly man frowned. He didn't expect that the enemy would be a little girl. But soon, he calmed down, and a touch of fierceness appeared in his eyes. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to break in, they must die. Xia Ji seemed indifferent to everything around her. She walked straight forward, seemingly slow, but in the blink of an eye, she had entered the hall. When she walked in front of a stone pillar, a sudden shout sounded, "Go to hell!" In the roar, a pair of bright and sharp giant axes smashed down. But when the blow fell, Xia Ji had already disappeared. The burly man's pupils shrank suddenly, and he knew it was not good. But it was too late. With a pu sound, a white-boned spear pierced through his chest from behind, and even his heart was shattered by the impact. Immediately, the burly man fell to the ground with his eyes bulging. He died with everlasting regret. When he looked at Xia Ji again, she had already disappeared. Hall Leader Liu is dead. Who is that little girl? Why is she so terrible? Where is she? Why is she gone? At this time, when the practitioners hiding in different places in this hall saw that the burly man was killed in one blow, they were all shocked and horrified. It was terrible. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would almost think it was an illusion. They didn't dare to move, and they all raised their vigilance. They only hoped that the Grandmaster would come back quickly, otherwise they might not be able to hold on. Suddenly, a scream sounded, and a practitioner hiding on the beam fell to the ground with a puff. There was a bloody hole in his throat, and blood was bursting out. This scene shocked the other cultivators to the point that their bodies trembled. Before they could even see clearly, another of their companions had been killed. Was that little girl a ghost or a mortal? Boom! Soon, the wall on one side of the hall collapsed, and smoke and dust splashed. A practitioner's body lay in it. His bones were broken, and his flesh was badly mutilated. He died miserably. Seeing this, the practitioners hiding in other places could no longer bear this kind of horror. They jumped out with a roar and no longer dared to hide separately. Instead, they began to gather together. It was too terrible. They couldn't see or feel the enemy. The enemy seemed to be invisible, but as time went by, their companions died on the spot one by one. Who would be able to endure this? These practitioners gathered together, about a dozen of them, all with fear on their faces. They were vigilant and uneasy. The fire in the distance kept changing on their ferocious faces. Where was the enemy? Where was he hiding? Chapter 83. The raging flames were burning in all areas of the Black Tiger Gang's lair, and the fire had spread out of control. Some people held on, hoping that Tiger Liu could return in time. But more people chose to escape. It was a mess. For these villains living at the bottom of the society, they didn't know what loyalty was for the sake of survival. When Lin Sun walked into the Black Tiger Gang's lair, he saw a lot of people running around in panic. He didn't chase them, but went straight to the hall. Soon, Lin Sun saw dozens of practitioners waiting in the hall, which was beyond his expectation. Didn't these guys know how to hide? I'll leave these people to you. I have something else to do. At this moment, Xia Ji's voice sounded and then disappeared. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and immediately smiled. He drew out the flaming spirit saber and rushed to the dozens of practitioners instead of retreating. One person and one saber were going to deal with dozens of practitioners. When the practitioners of Black Tiger Gang gathered in the hall saw this, they couldn't help but feel a little absurd. The most important thing was that they were dealing with a teenager. But when they thought of the little girl's horrible means, the absurdity in their hearts suddenly dissipated, and they became alert. Maybe this teenager was more powerful than the little girl? Boom! Seeing Lin Sun rushing to him, someone couldn't hold back anymore. He raised a long spear and fiercely stabbed at Lin Sun. The shadow of the spear was as sharp as lightning and contained frightening spiritual energy. This was an overmatch at the 5th level of martial realm. A thought flashed in Lin Sun's mind, but he didn't slow down at all. The blade hummed and shook violently against the opponent's spear. Bang! The horrible power was like a mountain. The opponent was shaken away with his spear and smashed on a stone pillar. Blood spurted from his mouth and nose, and he fainted on the spot. At the same time, a saber, a sword, and a hammer came to Lin Sun from different directions. The moves were tricky and ruthless, and the timing was extremely precise. Lin Sun jumped, and the blade suddenly rolled back, turning into a storm vortex with raging flames and a roar. With a bang, the opponent's long saber was cut in two, and his right arm was cut off. He screamed and retreated. The other sword and the hammer were severely knocked away, which made the two practitioners immediately reveal their flaws. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Sun changed his Tao and chopped down heavily. With a pop, the head of the Xiuzha holding the hammer was smashed, and he fell down. The sword-wielding Xiuzha dodged in time and luckily escaped, but he was so scared his face was pale and his soul was about to leave his body. In the blink of an eye, 3 people were killed on the spot. Lin Sun only used the 3 movements of 6-word saber play, namely shock, spin, and chop. Although his current saber play could not defeat Xia Ji, it was relatively speaking. It was more than enough to deal with these practitioners present. What's more, he was now wearing all kinds of spiritual equipment and holding a flaming spirit saber. He was armed to the teeth, and his combat effectiveness was at least 30% stronger than before. On the contrary, few of his opponents were at the 8th level of martial realm. Most of them were at the 5th level of martial realm, which was hardly a threat to Lin. When Lin Sun was at the 5th level of martial realm, he could fight evenly with Du Shirao, who was at the 7th level of martial realm. Now that he had reached the 6th level of martial realm, his combat effectiveness was naturally much stronger than before. Seeing several companions were killed in a flash, the other practitioners of Black Tiger Gang in the hall were shocked, and their faces changed suddenly. "Hurry up! Let's kill this boy together!" With a roar, those practitioners moved together. No one dared to hold back anymore. They besieged Lin Sun with ferocious faces. For a time, the hall was full of fighting sounds, which was like a purgatory battlefield. The walls collapsed, the ground cracked, and all kinds of items in the hall had already been turned into powder. Kill! Lin Sun fought with his saber. His figure was as vigorous as a flying eagle. The flaming spirit saber splashed in all directions, and the crimson saber light shot out like a fiery rainbow with terrible destructive power. Although it was the first time for one person to fight against dozens of practitioners, Lin Sun was not flustered at all. His dark eyes were deep and calm, and his delicate and warm face was even calmer. Beneath his calm exterior, however, was a burning desire to fight and kill. Fight! The smell of blood and fire seemed to have magic power, which opened the desire that Lin Sun had never had in his heart. Kill! 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 The boy from the mine prison had long hair flying in the air, and the saber in his hand was like a dragon, which rolled up a bloody storm. The screams of the enemies when they fell were like passionate music, which made Lin Sun more and more arrogant and powerful. The blood of the enemies was like the strongest wine in the world, which made Lin Sun feel a kind of pleasure that he had never had before. At this moment, Lin Sun completely forgot himself and immersed himself in the battle. He forgot the world and all the people in the world. In his eyes, there were only enemies. Bang! A practitioner didn't dodge in time, and his head was cut off. Clatter! On the other side, a practitioner's legs were cut off, and he fell in a pool of blood in the sea of fire. Boom! A bronze mace suddenly attacked from behind and hit Lin Sun's shoulder, but it was blocked by the Yunshan shoulder armor engraved with Fifth Earth spiritual tattoo. Most of the power was dissolved, but the shoulder bone was still broken. But Lin Sun didn't seem to feel it. He retreated quickly and cut open the belly of the attacker from behind with the saber in his hand. This was a close combat, fierce and tragic. There was no room for hesitation. Life and death could be decided in an instant. At this moment, Lin Sun was not only ruthless to the enemies, but also to himself. He would rather be injured to seize every fleeting opportunity to kill the enemies. The enemies were falling down constantly, and Lin Sun's body was covered with wounds. The blood was spreading and staining his clothes, but his expression never wavered. The flaming spirit saber in his hand was more precise, fierce, and stable. Like a god of war who would never fall, he wielded his saber in the blood and fire, deducing the changes of life and death. It seemed that a long time had passed, but it also seemed that it was only a moment. Lin Sun suddenly felt light. When he looked around, there were only 7 or 8 enemies left. Beneath his feet were numerous broken corpses that lay in pools of blood and were being burned by the raging flames, causing the pungent smell of burnt flesh and blood to fill every inch of the ground. More than half of the dozens of enemies had been slaughtered. Lin Sun, who woke up from the battle, realized that he had become so powerful. Yes, perhaps Lin Sun was still in the martial realm, and there was still a long way to go before he reached the gang spirit realm. But compared with the weak one, when he stepped in a Feiyun village for the first time, Lin Sun had been reborn. The 7 or 8 practitioners on the opposite side seemed to be shocked, and their faces were full of unconcealable panic. They looked at the teenager in front of them as if they were looking at a demon bathed in blood, trembling all over uncontrollably. Yes, they were petrified. Besieged by dozens of people, they couldn't do anything to a teenager on the 6th level of martial realm. What's more, they were all killed by him. What chilled them most was that Lin Sun's killing method was extremely straightforward. He didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. That kind of silence almost suffocated them. What kind of teenager was he on Earth? Step. Lin Sun moved again. He took a step forward, and his footsteps made a dull sound in the pool of blood. In the past, no one would pay attention to this sound at all. But in this silent and oppressive hall, it was like a note that hastened death. The 7 or 8 practitioners were stiff all over, and then they roared in horror and fled out of the hall. They were terrified, and their fighting spirit had collapsed. In the case of death, they dared not struggle at all. Run. They had to run. This teenager was a demon who killed people without blinking an eye. It was so terrible. Lin Sun was in a daze, and then he shook his head. He didn't bother to chase after them. Glancing around, he walked to the depths of the hall. The sharp pain all over his body hit Lin Sun's mind like a tide. After the battle, he found that even though he wore all kinds of spiritual weapons, he still suffered many injuries, such as knife wounds, sword wounds, and internal injuries. These were not important to Lin Sun. As a murderer in the mine prison said, scars were the most glorious feats of a man. What made Lin Sun frown was that after a round of fierce fighting, he had consumed a lot of spiritual energy in his body and couldn't hold on for too long. The most urgent thing was to find Xia Ji as soon as possible. Soon, Lin Sun disappeared into the depths of the hall. Behind him, the walls of the hall collapsed, the stone pillars were destroyed, and the sea of consciousness was burning in a pool of blood. The scene was like purgatory. Outside the hall, the towering fire illuminated the night. Everything indicated that the lair of the Black Tiger Gang had completely fallen. When Tiger Liu returned with a group of subordinates, he saw a towering fire. The lair he had painstakingly managed for many years was completely covered in a sea of fire. For a moment, Tiger Liu's face was extremely livid, and his eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets. Behind him, all his subordinates changed their expressions and cried out involuntarily. When they left, there were still many people left in the lair. Had they all been killed? Boss, you're finally back. A practitioner with disheveled hair and a dirty face rushed over and burst into tears. Who did it? Tiger Liu's voice seemed to be squeezed out from his teeth, revealing endless coldness. It's a teenager and a little girl. The man gnashed his teeth and roared. They not only killed many of our brothers, but also set fire to our territory. Boss, you must avenge our brothers. All the people were in an uproar. The murderers were not from other gangs, but just a teenager and a little girl. How could they destroy their lair with only 2 people? How could it be possible? Where are they? Tiger Liu's face became more livid, and his eyes became bloodshot. It suddenly occurred to him that the target they were supposed to kill was a teenager named Lin Sun. Did Lin Sun not escape, but take the opportunity to harm the Black Tiger Gang? At the thought of this, Tiger Liu's heart sank again. They were tricked. It's inside. The practitioner pointed to the lair of Black Tiger Gang and said. Tiger Liu's beard and hair stood on end. He couldn't hold back his anger anymore and shouted, "Rush in with me and find these 2 little things. I want to see them alive or dead." Chapter 84. Mutilated corpses were everywhere, and pools of blood were everywhere. The castle-like lair was burned to the point where only an empty frame was left. It was a scene of devastation. Tiger Liu strode forward. Looking at these shocking scenes, he felt a sharp pain in his heart, as if being cut by a knife. These were his subordinates, his painstaking efforts. Now, they were destroyed overnight. How could Tiger Liu not be angry? His face was livid, his eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body emitted a horrible aura, as if he wanted to devour people. Soon, he entered the hall. All the subordinates had begun to search for the traces of the enemy, but Tiger Liu was more concerned about another thing. Before long, he came to the end of the hall. It was originally a stone wall, but now a huge hole was broken. Inside the hole, there was another world, and a spiral staircase led to the underground. Damn it! Seeing this, Tiger Liu's face twitched violently. He waved his hand, gritted his teeth, and said, "You all stay here and wait." With that, he rushed into the hole and disappeared along the spiral staircase. Seeing this, the subordinates of the Black Tiger Gang who followed him all looked at each other in surprise and doubt. It seems to be the treasure place of the gang leader. Someone lowered his voice. It's more than the treasure place. The wealth collected by the gang leader over the years, as well as the property plundered by the gang, are all piled up here. But it seems that this place has been discovered by the enemy. Voices of discussion arose, and everyone looked gloomy. Had it not been for Tiger Liu's order, they would have rushed in to find out. However, they all knew that no matter whether the treasure place was stolen or not, Tiger Liu, who valued money more than his life, would definitely not let them get close. Alas, we've obviously returned too late. I'm afraid that thief has already fled long ago. Someone sighed, which made the others look more and more gloomy. At the bottom of the spiral staircase was a basement. The 4 walls were inlaid with moonstones, and the soft luster dispelled the darkness. This was the treasure place of the Black Tiger Gang. But when Tiger Liu set foot here again and saw the scene in the basement clearly, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. In a large space, there were more than 10 huge bronze chests that were originally filled with gold, silver, jewels, spiritual medicines, and spiritual materials. But now, they were all lying on the ground. The bronze locks on the chests were all broken, and the chests were completely empty. Not even a single copper coin was left. It took Tiger Liu decades to collect those treasures, but now they were looted. The feeling of grievance, anger, and madness made Tiger Liu's face ferocious. Blue veins stood out on his forehead. He couldn't help roaring, "Damn it! His voice was like a clap of thunder, causing the walls to tremble. Boom! Suddenly, the innermost corner of the wall collapsed, revealing a bronze door. However, a crack had been forcefully broken open on the door, just enough for people to squeeze through. Seeing this, Tiger Liu was so angry that he trembled all over. His eyes were about to crack and bleed. It was a door of escape that he had personally repaired. It was for the sake of leaving a way out for himself. If there was a day when unpredictable danger really occurred, he would be able to safely escape with his enormous wealth. In order to repair the door, Tiger Liu specially invited a spiritual tattooist to carve a spiritual tattoo lock on the door. In the end, the spiritual tattooist was even killed by Tiger Liu in order to prevent the secret from leaking out. Who would have thought that this door of escape was also discovered and even destroyed? Tiger Liu was so angry that his beard and hair stood on end. His whole body emitted a tyrannical aura, and his face was livid and terrible. Seeing this scene, how could he not understand that the enemy had already taken his wealth and escaped through the door he repaired? Decades of painstaking efforts were all wasted by others in one move. At this moment, Tiger Liu was so angry that he was about to explode. Bastard who deserves 1,000 cuts. Don't let me catch you, or I'll kill you one by one. Tiger Liu roared. Swish! At this moment, a flash of saber light suddenly flashed out from the corner. Like a sudden flash of lightning, it violently attacked Tiger Liu from behind. Tiger Liu was immersed in rage, but his fighting instinct still existed. He sensed danger the first time, but he didn't dodge. Instead, he suddenly turned around and slapped down with his palm and fingers. Rumble! In an instant, the terrible gang spirit chi became tangible, rumbling like a raging sea, and even the air was shattered and dispersed. Before the saber light approached Tiger Liu, it was fiercely slapped out like a small boat falling into the sea. Bang! A black shadow hit the wall in the distance with a muffled groan. It was Lin's son, but at this moment his face was pale, his pupils contracted, and his heart palpitated. Was this the power of a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm? At that moment, he thought it was an excellent opportunity. Even if he couldn't kill Tiger Liu, he could at least injure him seriously. Unexpectedly, when he was fighting with Tiger Liu, Lin Sun found that he was wrong, ridiculously wrong. As a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm, Tiger Liu's body was covered with a layer of force field, all of which were transformed by the gang spirit force. It was impossible to break this layer of gang spirit force, let alone get close to him. Just now, Lin Sun only felt that he was like a fish rushing into the sea. Before he could react, he was slapped away by a huge wave. He couldn't even resist and resolve it. This was the horror of a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm. At this realm, practitioners were covered with dense gang spirit, like an iron wall, full of lethality. Strong practitioners in the martial realm couldn't get close to them at all. Although there was only one realm between the martial realm and the gang spirit realm, there was a world of difference between their strength. It was no different from an ant shaking a mountain. Little bastard, you didn't escape. Ha ha ha. Tiger Liu was not surprised, but happy. Lin Sun didn't escape. Didn't it mean that there was still a chance to get back his treasures? At this moment, Tiger Liu's mood was full of ups and downs. He was so sad and happy that he could hardly control his emotions. As he spoke, he suddenly broke through the air and clawed at Lin Sun in the distance. Rumble! The dazzling black gang spirit turned into a solid giant claw, covering the air. This was the means of a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm. He could release the gang spirit outside his body and kill people in the air. Strong practitioners in the martial realm couldn't do this at all. However, Tiger Liu was still in the air. He seemed to notice something, and his face suddenly changed. With his rich experience of many years of battles, he almost subconsciously twisted his waist in a weird way. Like a flying snake rising from the land, he gave up on Lin Sun and fiercely punched to one side. At the same time, a white-boned spear suddenly appeared. The body of the spear was as smooth as jade, filled with silver starlight, illusory and ethereal. It seemed to be slow, but when Tiger Liu noticed it, the tip of the spear had already reached his eyebrows. Boom! With a loud bang, the terrible spiritual power spread like a storm. More than 10 bronze chests on the ground were swept away in an instant and smashed on the walls, making a dull collision sound. Lin Sun's face suddenly changed because in his sight, Tiger Liu grabbed the white bone spear and lifted Xie Ji, who was holding the spear, in the air. Sure enough, there is someone else. I knew it. With his level, he couldn't kill his way in my territory. Obviously, the real mastermind of today's disaster is you, little girl. Tiger Liu laughed with a ferocious and cruel face. His light brown eyes were full of cunning. He had dominated the civilian area for decades and still stood strong. How could ordinary people compare with him? Those opponents who once looked down on him were now corpses on the ground. Lin Sun's vulnerable performance made Tiger Liu instantly guess that the boy must have other helpers. Sure enough, he was exposed in just one move. At this moment, Tiger Liu's heart was filled with the pleasure of revenge. Lin Sun's heart was filled with uncontrollable coldness. Tiger Liu was so cunning that he and Xie Ji still underestimated him. Without much delay, Lin Sun subconsciously rushed out to save Xie Ji. But at this moment, Xie Ji suddenly raised her head, revealing her face covered by the hat. At that moment, the whole basement seemed to be dim. The indescribable, beautiful face, which seemed not to belong to the world, appeared in front of him at this moment. Lin Sun was slightly dazzled. He felt that Xie Ji's beauty today seemed to be more dazzling than before, and even had a charm that could make the soul sink. Tiger Liu also held his breath, with a trace of trance on his face. Puff! With a muffled sound, Tiger Liu's shocking roar rang in Lin Sun's ears, completely waking him up. When he looked up, he saw that the white bone spear, which was originally held by Tiger Liu, had penetrated Tiger Liu's chest at some point. At the same time, Xie Ji was slapped away by a palm. F***CKU. Lin Sun was so angry that his eyes almost popped out, and a touch of uncontrollable anger surged in his heart. He rushed out violently and chopped at Tiger Liu with his saber. Xie Ji was slapped away, which was like a stab in his heart. The feeling was so strong that Lin Sun completely lost his temper. Lin Sun didn't notice that when he lost his mind in rage, a pair of blood-like vortexes were reflected in the depths of his pupils, under which was an endless abyss. Puff! With one chop, Tiger Liu's head was directly cut off and thrown away, which seemed to be very easy. All this was because Xie Ji's blow had already crushed Tiger Liu's heart and completely cut off his vitality. Lin Sun added this chop just to end Tiger Liu's death in an instant. But Lin Sun was like a mad devil at this moment, ignoring everything. After cutting off Tiger Liu's head, he didn't stop. He chopped Tiger Liu's body dozens of times in a row, as if he was venting his anger. Tiger Liu's body was mutilated. Lin Sun, it's time for us to go. Xie Ji's voice sounded. Although it was a little weak, it suddenly awakened Lin Sun in rage. He gasped a few times and came to Xie Ji. The little girl curled up on the ground, with a rare pale and weak look on her little face, and a pair of black jewel-like crescent eyes also became dim and lifeless. This made Lin Sun's heart ache again. Without thinking about anything else, he picked up Xie Ji, pulled out the white bone spear from Tiger Liu's body, and rushed out to the broken bronze door. Chapter 85. Late at night, in the dark and winding alley like a spider web, the lad ran all the way with the little girl in his arms. The whistling cold wind was like a knife, stinging his numb wounds. But compared with the worry in his heart, it was nothing. For the first time, Lin Sun found that Xie Ji had occupied an inseparable position in his heart. At the moment when she was hit flying, Lin Sun felt that the world collapsed. All his thoughts and ambitions disappeared, leaving only uncontrollable anger and madness. This feeling made Lin Sun's heart tremble, because for the first time, he knew that he could be irrational. Xie Ji, who was held in his arms, opened her eyes and looked at Lin Sun quietly. She didn't speak, but there seemed to be a faint smile on her pale face. Seeing that Courtyard 49 was not far away, Lin Sun suddenly saw a figure in front of his house before he could breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, the figure turned around and saw Lin Sun. It was Gu Yinping, the shopkeeper of Golden Hall. He seemed to understand something just by glancing at Lin Sun. He said seriously, "If you trust me, let me guard here." Lin Sun said in a hoarse voice, "Thank you." As he said, he rushed into the house with Xia Ji in his arms. He had no time to think about why Gu Yinping appeared here late at night. Gu Yinping watched Lin Sun's back disappear, and then he turned his mind and stood silently in front of the door like a door god. His appearance was ordinary, but as he stood there, he exuded an awe-inspiring aura that made him seem unmovable. "Father, I found out that the nest of Black Tiger gangs suddenly caught fire. It is said that a strong enemy killed their way in, but the specific situation is still unclear." Not long after, a teenager hurried in the distant alley. It was Gu Yang, the son of Gu Yinping. Gu Yinping nodded and said, "Lin Sun has come back. Be prepared. It may not be peaceful tonight." A touch of killing intent flashed across his face. "Father, I heard that the helper of Black Tiger Gang is a strong practitioner in gang spirit realm." Before Gu Yang finished, he was interrupted by Gu Yinping. "No matter who it is, no one can step into this door tonight." His voice was firm. Gu Yang was stunned and nodded silently. "Liang, remember, a real commercial cultivator is not a cunning and slick person, nor is he a scoundrel who sails according to the wind." After a moment of silence, Gu Yinping suddenly said calmly, "Lin Sun has done us a favor, and we should repay him with kindness. It has nothing to do with whether he will cooperate with us in the future." Gu Yang's heart shook, and he nodded solemnly. "I understand." Gu Yinping nodded. His eyes looked into the distant, deep night sky. This night would likely be very long. In the room, Lin carefully put Xia Ji on the bed and was anxious about what kind of medicine he should take to heal her. Xia Ji suddenly said, "I only need to practice for a while to recover. You don't have to worry about me anymore." Lin Sun breathed a sigh of relief and said, "You really don't need to take some spiritual medicine?" Summer Solstice shook her head and said, "If we kill Tiger Liu, it will inevitably cause chaos in the Black Tiger Gang, and all this will inevitably attract the attention of other gangs. Our Shuangmu gang will inevitably be affected. You have to be careful." Lin Sun immediately understood the meaning of her words. As soon as Tiger Liu died, the Black Tiger Gang would be leaderless and in chaos. This was a good time to annex it, and other gangs in the civilian area would certainly not miss such an opportunity. This was nothing for Lin Sun, but he had to be vigilant about whether other gangs would take the opportunity to deal with him and Xia Ji. Because now the civilian area knew that Lin Sun was the leader of Shuangmu Gang, and its power was constantly expanding, which had seriously threatened the survival of other gangs. Under such circumstances, if those gangs knew that he and Xia Ji were both seriously injured, they would be happy to take advantage of the situation and kill him and Xia Ji in one fell swoop. As the saying goes, when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. In the situation tonight, as long as other gangs saw the situation clearly, they would not be indifferent. On the bed, Xia Ji had already begun to cultivate. Her cultivation method was very unique. She sat in a lotus position with her back straight and shoulders stretched out. Her 10 fingers were interlocked, forming a strange hand seal and hugging in front of her. At the same time, she was permeated with an invisible force, and her whole body floated in the air. No one knew when the white bone spear also appeared and lay across Xia Ji's knees. Wisps of silver light floated from the surface of the spear and poured into Xia Ji's body. It could be clearly sensed that Xia Ji's breath was quiet and long, as if she had entered a mysterious, deep level of practice. In the past, Xia Ji only ate and slept as if she had never practiced at all. This was also the first time that Lin Sun saw Xia Ji practicing. Very mysterious. This was Lin Sun's biggest feeling. After staring quietly for a long time, Lin Sun saw that Xia Ji's breath became stable. So he was completely relieved and quietly turned around and walked out of the room. Ji was very mysterious. Lin Sun knew it from a long time ago, and he had long been accustomed to it. The night was like a curtain. Tonight the sky was covered with thick clouds, and the stars and moon could not be seen. It seemed very dull. Walking into the courtyard, Lin Sun began to deal with the wounds on his body silently. He took off his shoulder pads, wrist guards, and inner armor, and soon his body was exposed to the air. Bloody scars crisscrossed on his body, and there were bruises and internal injuries on his shoulders, ribs, and waist. Each kind of injury represented a kind of unbearable pain. With so many injuries piled up, it could be imagined how great the pain was. But Lin Sun seemed not to feel it, and he didn't even frown. He had to hurry up to repair his injuries, because tonight was doomed to be difficult. "Child, if you don't mind, let me help you." Gu Yinping walked into the courtyard and was surprised to see the wounds all over Lin Sun's body. "No need. I can do it myself." Lin Sun smiled and began to carefully clean each wound with water. Gu Yinping said with a little emotion, "If my son hadn't come back to tell me, you might have been in trouble. I'm afraid I wouldn't have known that you were so seriously injured." Lin Sun remembered that Gu Liang did come here in the evening. Obviously, what he told Gu Liang attracted Gu Yinping's attention, so he appeared in front of Lin Sun's house in the middle of the night. "It's nothing. The Black Tiger gang wanted to kill me, so I had to take the initiative to kill them first." Lin Sun cleaned the wounds all over his body, took out the prepared medicine, and began to apply it carefully. Speaking of this, he suddenly smiled. "Fortunately, Tiger Liu has been killed by me, which makes me a lot more relaxed." Tiger Liu was dead. Gu Yinping was taken aback and looked at Lin Sun in a different way. He could be sure that Lin Sun did not lie. And this also meant that Tiger Liu, a strong practitioner in gang spirit realm, might not exist in the world. Thinking that Lin Sun killed a strong practitioner in gang spirit realm, Gu Yinping couldn't calm down. This young man was really incredible. But Gu Yinping didn't ask too much. When he calmed down, he quickly thought of another thing and said, "Once Tiger Liu is dead, his subordinates will inevitably fall apart. Once such a situation occurs, it will inevitably arouse the covetous eyes of other forces." Lin Sun interrupted. "Shopkeeper Gu, you don't know, but I'm afraid that other forces will come to make life difficult for me tonight." As he said, he frankly told the ins and outs of the matter and didn't conceal anything about Shuangmu Gang. Hearing Lin's words, Gu Yinping seemed to have seen through Lin's intention. He nodded seriously and said, "The flaming spirit saber you sold last time helped Golden Hall a lot. Let me guard the door for you tonight." Lin Sun got up and solemnly saluted. "Thank you, Shopkeeper Gu." Then he said, "Shopkeeper Gu, you can call me Lin Sun in the future." Gu Yinping laughed. "Okay, but you can't call me Shopkeeper Gu. It sounds too distant." Lin Sun also laughed. "Then I'll be so bold to call you Uncle Gu." Gu Yinping laughed again, seeming to be quite happy, and said, "Take care of yourself. I'll go outside and see how many demons and monsters will come to die tonight." He turned around and left. Lin Sun looked at his back, disappearing outside the door, and couldn't help sighing with emotion in his heart. This Uncle Gu was not simple. Gu Yinping was indeed not simple. With only a flaming spirit saber, he made the whole Donglin town boil and made Golden Hall completely famous. Was this something an ordinary person could do? Now, he visited Lin Sun in the middle of the night just because of a word from his son, Gu Liang, which helped Lin Sun a lot. This was not icing on the cake, but a timely help. But from beginning to end, Gu Yinping never made any request, which was not like a businessman at all. But in this way, Lin Sun owed him a big favor. Even if he had any request in the future, Lin Sun would not refuse as long as he could do it. This was wisdom and means. Apart from making people deeply grateful, they also handled the matter beautifully. Even Lin Sun couldn't help admiring him at this time. At the same time, Gu Yinping, who was standing outside the door, also sighed with emotion in his heart. He had a rich life experience and had seen a lot of amazing young people. Some of them were outstanding in cultivation, and some of them were abnormally intelligent. Compared with these people, Lin Sun didn't seem to be so great. But Lin Sun had a unique breath, which was completely different from others. Gu Yinping couldn't tell the difference, but he was sure that as long as nothing happened to Lin Sun, this young man, he was destined to show amazing brilliance in the future. Will there be such a day? Gu Yinping's thoughts drifted for a moment as he thought of many things in the past. Suddenly, a sound of footsteps came from the alley in the distance, which immediately made Gu Yinping narrow his eyes and wake up from his thoughts. He still stood there motionless, but there was a faint, horrible breath gathering and running all over his body. His plain face had imperceptibly exuded a kind of compelling majesty. Chapter 86. Tiger Liu, the leader of Black Tiger Gang, was killed. In less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, the news spread throughout the entire civilian area, attracting the attention of many other gangs. The leaders of the gangs realized at the first time that the opportunity to expand their territory had come. Black Tiger Gang was the largest underground force in the civilian area of Donglin Town. In the past years, Black Tiger Gang's territory had been expanding because of Tiger Liu, a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm, who controlled many lucrative sources of profit. But now, with the death of Tiger Liu, Black Tiger Gang had completely lost its sharp fangs and became a piece of tempting fat, which everyone wanted to have a bite of. This was the only opportunity. If they couldn't seize it, it would be too late to regret later. So, on that night, almost all the gangs in the civilian area, such as Green Bamboo Gang, Blackwater Gang, Scorpion Gang, for a time, the alleys of the civilian area were full of ferocious gang members. Like a group of hungry wolves smelling blood, they rushed to the territory of Black Tiger Gang. Before long, the sound of fighting and cursing began to ring in various areas. The light of knives and swords, the rain of blood, and the wind of foul wind intertwined in the dark night, staging a tragic scene of life and death. This night was indeed not peaceful. The night shrouding the civilian area seemed to be bleeding. Before long, someone found out that Tiger Liu was killed by the leader of Shuangmu Gang. According to the intelligence, the leader of Shuangmu Gang had been seriously injured in the fight with Tiger Liu. Regardless of whether this information was true or false, it made many of the gang leaders think of another opportunity. In today's civilian area, Shuangmu Gang, like a rising star, rose strongly in less than a month and annexed 5 or 6 nearby gangs, which was also a serious threat to other gangs. Now, hearing that the death of the leader of Black Tiger Gang was related to Shuangmu Gang, other gangs immediately realized that the present situation was a situation of when the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Perhaps they could take this opportunity to annex the territory of Shuangmu Gang in one fell swoop. Before long, a group of people rushed to the front of Courtyard 49. This group of people came from the Scorpion Gang, headed by Chai Xiao, the second in the gang, nicknamed Poisonous Sparrowhawk. Chai Xiao was a strong practitioner on the 8th level of Martial Realm, famous for his ruthlessness and viciousness. Countless people had died in his hands over the years, so he was notorious. Behind Chai Xiao was a group of gang members, about a dozen of them, all practitioners. According to the arrangement of the leader of the Scorpion Gang, with such a strong elite force, it was enough to eradicate the seriously injured leader of Shuangmu Gang. Of course, it didn't matter even if the leader escaped. They were Shuangmu Gang members, Shuangmu Gang. Hurry, don't let other gangs get ahead of us. After we kill Shuangmu Gang's leader, this area will be our Scorpion Gang's territory. Chai Xiao shouted loudly, urging everyone. He was complacent and eager to make a move. When Chai Xiao, Gang Shuangmu Gang members, and Shuangmu Tiger Gang, and Shuangmu Gang, Chai Chuan, Chao Tiger, Gang and Li Gang, Gang Sec, Tiger, but when he arrived in front of Courtyard 49, Chai Xiao suddenly froze and saw a man standing in front of the gate. That man looked mediocre, standing there quietly, like an ordinary person. But when Chai Xiao saw this man, he felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. This was definitely not the leader of Shuangmu Gang. But who was this man? Chai Xiao was cunning. With a flash of his eyes, he waved his hand and said, "Let's rush in together." Immediately, a group of practitioners of the Scorpion Gang moved out, each with a cruel face. On the contrary, Chai Xiao quietly hid behind and did not go forward. Until now, the fear in his heart had not subsided, which made him smell the breath of danger. He planned to wait and see. Looking at a group of practitioners rushing over, Gu Yinping curled his lips with a touch of disdain. He held his hands casually in a circle and pressed gently in the void. Clatter! Like the sound of rushing water, the bright and dazzling blue power of Gang spirits surged like a lifelike water dragon, hovering between Gu Yinping's palms and making a vigorous roar, like a dragon's roar. Secret combat skill, Water Dragon Roar. Boom! Those practitioners who rushed over only felt a blur in front of their eyes. With a bang, all of them seemed to be shaken out and hit the surrounding walls. Their bones and tendons were broken, and they all fainted. It was just a casual blow, but it suppressed more than a dozen people in an instant. It was nothing more than that. What kind of power did this strike possess to be able to achieve such a feat? Hiss! In the distance, Chai Xiao gasped as if he was struck by lightning. A strong practitioner of Gang spirit realm, releasing spiritual power, killing enemies in the air, and the means of deriving Gang spirit into a rushing water dragon were obviously not ordinary combat skills. But how could such a guy be willing to be a gatekeeper in front of the number 49 courtyard tonight? Chai Xiao felt cold all over and subconsciously turned around to escape. Bang! But in merely an instant, a surging water dragon arrived before him. It instantly drowned Chai Xiao's entire body. He suddenly let out a shrill cry, and then his body fell to the ground with a thump as he perished on the spot. This sudden battle was finished in just a few blinks of an eye. From beginning to end, Gu Yinping only used one move to kill all the people on the scene. Lin Sun, who had been standing in the gate and watching for a long time, couldn't help but feel surprised. Gu Yinping turned out to be a hidden master of Gang spirit realm, and Lin Sun had a strong feeling that even if Tiger Liu was still alive, he might not be a match for Gu Yinping. The blow just now was too incredible. Gang spirit turned into a water dragon, roaring and glaring, piercing the night. Its power was also extremely terrible. At least Lin Sun was not sure whether he could resist this blow or not. Father, why did you kill him? In the distance, Gu Yang came in a hurry and asked in puzzlement. Gu Yinping didn't answer, but looked at Lin Sun inside the gate and said, Lin Sun, do you know why I let them stay? To make an example for others. Lin Sun smiled and said concisely, I see. Gu Yang also understood. Tonight, because of the Black Tiger Gang, other gangs in the civilian area were like flies smelling blood. It was destined that there would be no peace tonight. Similarly, the situation was extremely unfavorable and dangerous for Lin Sun. This time, it was a group of elites from the Scorpion Gang. Maybe some other gang members would come one after another later. If he didn't establish his power as soon as possible, even if Gu Yinping was in charge in person, it was bound to be extremely troublesome. Why didn't your Shuangmu gang members come out tonight? Gu Yinping suddenly asked. Lin Sun said casually, I have ordered them to hide today. No matter what they hear, they can't get involved. Gu Yinping understood in an instant and praised generously what a good strategy of watching the fire from the other side and watching the tigers fight. Gu Yang looked at Lin Sun in surprise and said, Have you already predicted that so many things would happen tonight? Lin Sun explained patiently, I just made some preparations in advance. As soon as Tiger Liu died, the Black Tiger Gang would inevitably be occupied by other gangs. Letting a group of hungry wolves grab a piece of meat is bound to cause some fierce battles. If the Shuangmu Gang gets involved, obviously it is impossible to avoid confrontation and competition with other gangs. It's better to lie dormant first and watch the tigers fight. After a pause, he continued, After this fight, other gangs may be able to occupy a lot of territory of the Black Tiger Gang, but they will also lose a lot of strength because of the fight. When there is a chance in the future, it is not difficult to annex them one by one. Listening to Lin Sun's orderly and calm analysis, Gu Yang said with slight admiration, No wonder my father appreciates you so much. You are really different from others. Originally, he didn't think much of Lin Sun when he saw that Lin Sun was only a teenager of 13 or 14 years old. who was a few years younger than him. But now hearing this, plus Lin Sun's feat of killing Tiger Liu, Gu Yang's impression of him suddenly changed greatly. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. He turned around and walked into the courtyard. That night, the fight between the gangs continued, and the entire civilian area was not peaceful. It was unknown how many residents were disturbed from their dreams. Similarly, after Chai Xiao and others of the Scorpion Gang, many gangs sent people to take the opportunity to encroach on the territory of the Shuangmu Gang. But when they saw Chai Xiao's body lying on the ground and more than a dozen corpses of practitioners belonging to the Scorpion Gang, these gang members all retreated decisively and left in a hurry with all kinds of shocked and complicated thoughts. This night seemed particularly long. Lin Sun, however, looked very calm. He sat alone in the courtyard and meditated to heal his wounds. It seemed that he had completely forgotten that the initial realm was still full of danger. However, his calm and composed state of mind caused Gu Yinping to look at him in an even higher light. In the same night, in a single dormitory in Donglin School, Lian Fei paced back and forth restlessly. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was not sleepy at all. Why hadn't there been any news until now? The efficiency of the Black Tiger Gang was too low. Lian Fei was restless. He worried about gains and losses. If he couldn't kill Lin Sun this time, there wouldn't be many chances for revenge in the future. Suddenly, the door was pushed open, and a gust of cold wind poured in. The biting chill made Lian Fei shiver all over. Only then did he see clearly that it was Shui Yong who came in. But Shui Yong's face was extremely bad at the moment. As soon as he entered the room, he gritted his teeth and said, "The operation failed." "What?" Lian Fei cried out with a dull look. "Failed? How could it be possible?" He suddenly became excited again, and his face was gloomy and ruthless. He grabbed Shui Yong's lapel and said sternly, "Tiger Liu is a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm with thousands of gang members under his command. How could he be defeated?" Shui Yong pushed Lian Fei away and said coldly, "I'm not afraid to tell you that Tiger Liu was not only defeated, but also became a dead body. The murderers were Lin Sun and a little girl. Think about it yourself. I have to go back to the clan to report this matter." After that, Shui Yong flicked his sleeves and left. Whimper, the cold wind whistled and slapped against the door, making it creak. Lian Fei seemed to be unaware of it. He looked dull and lost, and just murmured, "A practitioner on the 5th level of martial realm killed a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm. How could it be possible?" After a long time, Lian Fei calmed down a little, but the haze on his face couldn't be wiped away for a while. He knew that the continuous failures, especially the murder of Tiger Liu, would only make Clan of Wu re-examine the degree of danger Lin Sun posed, and they wouldn't act rashly in a short time. This also meant that Lian Fei had completely lost the power to support his revenge. No matter how unwilling he was, he had to bear it. "Lin Sun, don't be complacent too early. Sooner or later, I will sacrifice your life to my father's soul." Lian Fei's handsome face was grim and ferocious at the moment, as if there was a fierce beast roaring in his heart. Chapter 87. It was early in the morning, not far from dawn. Lin Sun devoted himself to cultivation. His injuries were not serious, and they could be completely healed in 3 or 5 days after applying the spiritual medicine. Thanks to his physical strength, which had become much stronger than before, he would be fine as long as the ordinary knife and sword wounds didn't hurt his vital parts. At this time, Lin Sun was deducing the 6-word saber play in his mind. In the bloody battle he had experienced in the Black Tiger Gang's lair, he had single-handedly killed dozens of true martial realm practitioners. At that moment, he had been completely immersed in the battle and had no chance to carefully experience the details of the battle. Thinking of it now, Lin Sun had a lot of enlightenment. Battles were never armchair strategies, nor could they be done behind closed doors. Although the 6-word saber play only had 6 movements, chopping, entangling, spinning, shaking, stabbing, and peeling, each movement contained many mysteries, which could be called a unique saber play with both ruthlessness and difficulty. But in the final analysis, the six-word saber play was still a kind of fighting skill created for fighting. If one wanted to understand and master its mysteries, he absolutely couldn't do it without fighting. In the past, Lin Sun didn't have much fighting experience. He could only achieve the nuanced level of the martial Tao with great efforts, and then it was difficult to make further progress. But now, after a bloody battle and the tempering and polishing of life and death, Lin Sun had many more insights. The subtle key points that he couldn't understand in the past all emerged in his mind at this moment, and he was gradually comprehended. As long as I experience some more battles, I should be able to achieve the precision level of the six-word saber play. Lin Sun had a feeling that the bloody battle of this night deepened his understanding of the six-word saber play, and at the same time, his control and cognition of strength had a new improvement. Suddenly, a conversation arose outside the gate of the courtyard, which attracted Lin Sun's attention. He immediately got up and went out. It was already late at night, and dawn was coming. The fighting in the civilian area had begun to gradually decrease. In front of Lin Sun's house, Gu Yanping, a strong practitioner in the gang spirit realm, had completely cut off the possibility of other gangs attacking. Who would come at such a time? When he walked out the gate of the yard, Lin Sun saw an unexpected person, Fu Wanglin, an appraiser of Keystone business. What surprised Lin Sun the most was that Wang Lin was not alone. He also brought a group of subordinates with him, carrying a string of bloody heads in their hands. Could it be that after Mu Wansu heard about what happened tonight, she found her conscience and sent Wang Lin to support her? As soon as this idea came to Lin Sun's mind, he immediately denied it. Mu Wansu was a woman who had a clear distinction between love and hate. Moreover, her attitude was decisive. If she wanted to help him, she would have immediately arranged some means when the Black Tiger Gang was preparing to deal with him. Why would she wait until now? Then, why was Wang Lin here? Lin Sun was a little uncertain. A few days ago, he was driven away from Keystone business by Wang Lin. Although he knew it was Mu Wansu's idea, Lin Sun still had a little grudge in his heart. On that day, he personally sent the Flaming Spirit Saber to Keystone business. He thought that Keystone business would appreciate it, and it could be regarded as his repayment for the previous kindness. Who would have thought that he was asked to leave, which was a bit uncomfortable? Wang Lin was talking with Gu Yanping. Seeing Lin Sun, he immediately smiled and said, "Child Lin, please forgive me for disturbing you so late at night." Lin Sun said with a smile, "Uncle Wang Lin is too polite." His attitude was neither cold nor warm, neither humble nor arrogant, and he didn't mean to invite Wang Lin into his home. Seeing this, Wang Lin couldn't help sighing in his heart. This little guy still had resentment in his heart. On his face, Wang Lin smiled more amiably and said, "Late at night, I heard that some thieves were going to make trouble for Child Lin, so I hurried to support you with my subordinates. On the way, I met some thieves who were going to make trouble for you, so I made the decision to take them all down." Speaking of this, he pointed to a string of human heads in the hands of his subordinate next to him and said, "Child, please have a look." There seemed to be some big shots from the Green Bamboo Gang among them. Lin Sun immediately understood that Wang Lin came to express his goodwill. Obviously, he had found out the relationship between Lin Sun and Shuangmu Gang, so he showed great sincerity. Taking the Green Bamboo Gang as an example could be regarded as an act of making amends. But why did Wang Lin do this? Obviously, all this had something to do with the Flaming Spirit Saber sold to Golden Hall a few days ago. And Wang Lin might have guessed something when he came here. So he made up his mind to express his goodwill to Lin Sun. "Thank you, Uncle Wang Lin." Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, "Haha, it's nothing. As long as you are safe and sound, it's enough." Wang Lin laughed loudly. "Lin Sun, it's about to dawn. I think the situation has stabilized, so I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye." Gu Yanping suddenly said, "Uncle Gu, wait a minute." Lin Sun suddenly thought of something and hurried back to his room. When he came back, he handed a parcel to Gu Yanping and said, "This is a gift from me. Please accept it." Gu Yanping raised his eyebrows and said, "If it's just some worldly possessions, take them back. I didn't come to help you for these." Lin Sun smiled and said, "Uncle Gu, you can open it and have a look." Gu Yanping thought for a while and finally took the parcel. When he opened it, his eyes suddenly narrowed. There was a flaming spirit saber overflowing with cold light in the parcel. Seeing this scene, Wang Lin on one side was also shocked. Sure enough, Lin Sun had more than one flaming spirit saber. He must have something to do with the mysterious spiritual tattooist. Gu Yinping put it away calmly, glanced at Wang Lin, and nodded to Lin Sun. Golden Hall is in urgent need of such a good treasure to keep up appearances. I will accept it, but when this treasure is sold, Golden Hall will give a fair price for the profit. When Lin Sun was about to say something, Gu Yinping waved his hand and interrupted him with a smile. Just listen to me. Well, goodbye. As he said, he turned around and left with Gu Liang. The demeanor of scrupulously abiding by rules and propriety was obviously different from that of other businessmen. This was a commercial practitioner. As soon as Gu Yinping left, Wang Lin also said goodbye and hurried away with a group of guards. Lin Sun didn't ask Wang Lin to stay. He watched Wang Lin leave, but he was very clear that Wang Lin would tell Mu Wansu everything he saw today after returning to Keystone Business. If Mu Wansu knew that he had more than one flaming spirit saber, what would she think? Lin Sun thought with some ridicule, and then shook his head silently. Heath and Mu Wansu were not enemies. Speaking of which, he still owed Keystone Business a favor. So although Lin Sun had some complaints about Mu Wansu in his heart, he wouldn't do anything to disgust Mu Wansu. The reason why he let Wang Lin see the flaming spirit saber tonight was also a signal sent by Lin Sun to reconfirm Mu Wansu's real attitude towards him. Without thinking more, Lin Sun closed the gate of the courtyard and returned to the house. Xia Ji was still practicing, and there was no sign of her waking up. He couldn't help thinking that after what happened tonight, whether it was Clan of Wu or Lin Fei, as long as they were not stupid, they should restrain themselves a little. Clan of Wu in the splendid conference hall, there were endless quarrels. Since Tiger Liu of Black Tiger Gang was killed, this kind of quarrel had been going on. Wu Chaochuan, first elder Wu Yunshan, second elder Wu Yushan, and third elder Wu Lanshan all looked gloomy. The core of the quarrel was whether to continue the action of killing Lin Sun. Some people said that Wu Henshue, Wu Jie, and others were all killed by Lin Sun, which made Clan of Wu lose face. They must eradicate Lin Sun to defend the dignity of Clan of Wu. Some people also said that Black Widow, Du Xiao, and Elder Frown were all defeated in the operation these days. Even Tiger Liu of Black Tiger Gang was killed, which made the huge price paid by the Clan of Wu go down the drain. All these had completely proved that Lin Sun was not easy to deal with. The urgent task was not to continue the action, but to reformulate a plan and make a plan slowly. These two views had their own reasons, so they didn't reach a consensus after quarreling for a long time. It wasn't until dawn arrived that a scout came to report. Only then did this long quarrel come to end. The news was very simple. It said that Gu Yinping, the shopkeeper of Golden Hall, had stood up for Lin Sun. At the same time, Wang Lin of Keystone Business went to Lin Sun's home with a group of guards. All these showed that Keystone Business also began to intervene in this matter. When they learned all this, the bigwigs of Clan of Wu completely realized the seriousness of the situation. Finally, they reached a consensus that they should bear it for the time being and wait and see. They were not afraid of Lin Sun, a teenager, but they had to consider the power of Keystone Business. Gu Yinping, the shopkeeper of Golden Hall, was not simple either. He was a strong practitioner in Gang Spirit Realm, who could be regarded as a top figure in Donglin Town. Under such circumstances, even if Clan of Wu was unwilling and aggrieved, they had no choice but to change their strategy against Lin Sun. At the break of dawn, the deep night was dispelled, and a new day ushered in the world. On this new day, the chaos and blood of last night in the civilian area had already come to an end. Even if there were still some undercurrents, at least they had been temporarily stabilized. All these waves were confined to the civilian area and did not affect other areas of Donglin Town. This was quite normal. Every year in the civilian area, some gangs were destroyed and some new gangs were born. The change of old and new forces was so frequent that people living here had long been accustomed to it. On the same new day, Golden Hall announced again in the morning that it would sell a new flaming spirit saber, which immediately caused a lot of uproar and attention. Wang Lin walked into the deepest courtyard of Keystone Business and was ready to report to Mu Wansu what had happened last night. In Courtyard 49 of the civilian area, Lin Sun had washed up in a hurry and began to repair the severely damaged and messy courtyard. In the room, Xia Ji was still meditating. Her quiet and beautiful face was bathed in the morning sunshine, which was picturesque. Chapter 88. After 10 minutes, I wanted to write a speech, but my mind was blank as I sat there. My fingers were sore, and my muscles were stiff. However, my nerves were unexpectedly excited, as if I was possessed. This wasn't right, I knew, but I still had to say something. I wouldn't feel good if I didn't. Those who had read Rune Emperor before would know that Goldfish had started preparing for this new book in November last year. By then, she would be gathering materials, organizing documents, tinkering with the outline, refining inspiration. She would be extremely busy. After preparing for around 3 months, she finally decided on the theme of the Heavenly Genius Battle in February this year. There was no need to tell others about the struggle and pain involved. Then, on February 24th, she officially released the first chapter of the Heavenly Genius Battle. It had been updated continuously for 36 days, and she had written 257,000 words. I couldn't tell whether the new book was good or bad, but the numbers had exceeded my original expectations. This made me heave a sigh of relief. Every author was worried that their new book would be a flop. They were worried that the new book wouldn't be good enough and would be abandoned by the readers. Goldfish was no exception. This worry had persisted since the day the new book was released. She couldn't get rid of it or vent it. In her daily life, she didn't have much entertainment to do for the sake of writing a book. It was boring, but she had to endure it. Everything she had done was because she cared too much. A book was like an author's child. This saying wasn't just for show. Luckily, in the past 36 days, many of her old brothers and friends had accompanied her. There were also many new friends who were active in the book review and comment section. This let Goldfish know that at least she wasn't fighting alone. Writing a book was lonely, so she craved for everyone's approval and support. That was the only way for every author to persevere in writing. In the past 36 days, her friends in the V group, the Goldfish Pond normal chat group, the club, and many of her friends on WeChat were following the new book. This was probably the happiest thing that Goldfish felt when she wasn't writing. Especially tonight, with the help of our brothers and sisters, we have taken the 5th place on the monthly votes ranking in the first month of the Prodigy Battle Chronicles. 5th place. For a new book, this was an unimaginable glory. This belongs to me, belongs to the Prodigy Battle, and belongs to everyone here. To be honest, before I try to break into the monthly votes ranking, I felt like I was overestimating myself, like I was trying to hit a rock with an egg. I didn't have confidence in myself, and I didn't dare to believe it. After all, it was only the first month of a new book, and my foundation was shallow. How could I possibly have the chance to rise? But in the end, with everyone's support, it became a reality. When I saw this impressive result, I was really stunned. I couldn't tell what I was feeling. I refreshed the page dozens of times before I finally dared to believe that it was true. Then, I sat there and smoked a cigarette, laughing like an idiot. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of myself. Here, I especially want to thank Xia Ji. Really, without her efforts this month, we definitely wouldn't have gotten 5th place. Xia Ji was a good girl. She studied hard and was kind. Everyone in the group liked her. It was just like how I used Xia Ji to say to the main character Lin Sun in the Tianjiao battle, "I'll help you." It was just 3 simple words, but I was so touched that I was stunned for a long time. The feeling was truly wonderful. Also, Tycoon X, this guy looked like he didn't care about anything, but he was actually the most responsible one. Not only did he help me get on the monthly votes ranking, he also helped me manage a few book friend groups. He put in a lot of effort behind the scenes, and I saw it with my own eyes. Between men, I would never show anything, but I was definitely grateful. Also, Brother Jiyue, Sister Do Jian, Tung Xiao, Qing Tian, Thinking Cat, Little Sue, Taoist Xiao Xiao, Lemon, Ming Exclusive Scum, the Song Little 7 Silent Voice, Rin Huanyu, Yanbatu, Watch Q Wolf, Black-Eyed, so many brothers and sisters. If I listed them one by one, it would take me a long time to finish. Why did I say so much? That's because in the years I've been writing, I've always believed in a concept. Book friends and authors aren't enemies, but friends. I won't put on airs, nor will I use my identity as an author to put on airs. Instead, I'm really willing to communicate with everyone and treat everyone as friends. I'm not afraid of being laughed at. In the V group, I've always been a funny character, but I feel quite happy. At least when people communicate with me, they've thrown away a lot of barriers regarding my identity as an author and treated me as a friend. That's what I want. I've said so much because I have feelings, and I won't be happy if I don't say it out. If I want to be grateful, I'll say it all out so that everyone can understand what I'm thinking. That's enough. Finally, it's the first day of April. The monthly votes in everyone's hands have been refreshed. Please vote for Goldfish. A new month has begun, and Goldfish won't slack off. My friends who followed me from Rune Emperor all know that Goldfish has never dropped the ball when it comes to writing books. Now that I'm writing the Tianjiao battle, I'll only work harder. In this way, I won't disappoint everyone's support and love. Chapter 89. In the early morning, Mu Wansu sat in front of the table and tidied up her makeup meticulously in front of the bronze mirror. A beautiful woman would never show her sloppy side to others. Mu Wansu was undoubtedly extremely beautiful, mature, and charming, like a plump honey peach, attracting people's reverie. When Wang Lin came to visit, Mu Wansu had finished her makeup, and her delicate face was even more dazzling. "What's so early in the morning?" she asked with a little surprise. "It's about Lin's son." Wang Lin didn't conceal anything and told her everything he saw and knew last night. When he was talking, he didn't notice that Mu Wansu's originally bright and beautiful face became gloomy. When Wang Lin said that he helped Lin Sun kill some leaders of the Green Bamboo Gang, Mu Wansu couldn't help interrupting him. "Who asked you to help him?" Her voice was cold and questioning. Wang Lin was silent for a moment and said, "Miss Wansu, you told me to keep an eye on all the movements about Lin Sun a few days ago. Last night, I found out that Gu Yinping of Golden Hall had come forward before me. Do you know what he did?" Mu Wansu frowned and said impatiently, "Just say it." When it came to Lin Sun, her temper inexplicably became extremely bad, and she was not as calm and elegant as before. As a strong practitioner of Gang Spirit Realm, Gu Yinping was willing to be the gatekeeper of Lin Sun at that time, and even his son Gu Liang was called over. Wang Lin sighed with emotion. "I didn't understand it at first, but later I finally realized that the key to all this was Lin Sun." Mu Wansu was confused and frowned more and more. She said, "What on earth do you want to say?" Seeing that Mu Wansu obviously lost her patience, Wang Lin didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, "To be honest, Lin Sun has more than one flaming spirit saber. He must have a close relationship with the mysterious spiritual tattooist." Mu Wansu suddenly felt a chill in her heart. How do you know? She really cared about the mysterious spiritual tattooist. Now all the major businesses in Donglin Town were looking for him with all their strength, because everyone knew that if they could control this mysterious spiritual tattooist, it would definitely bring them immeasurable wealth in the future. Although Keystone Business was a top force in the empire, Mu Wansu could only rely on herself if she wanted to expand in this remote Donglin town. "I saw Lin Sun hand a flaming spirit saber to Gu Yinping last night," Wang Lin said, "and just this morning, Gu Yinping released the news about this saber, which caused a lot of sensation. Miss Wansu, you only need to check it and you will know whether it is true or not." Mu Wansu fell silent. Wang Lin had no reason to lie to her. She just couldn't imagine how Lin Sun, a teenager who had just entered Donglin Town from Feiyun Village, could establish an unusual relationship with a mysterious spiritual tattooist in less than a month. This was simply too inconceivable. After a long time, Mu Wansu asked, "So if we want to find a mysterious spiritual tattooist, we have to pass through Lin Sun?" Wang Lin nodded and said, "Exactly." After a pause, he continued, "Miss Wansu, you may not know that last night, the leader of the Black Tiger Gang, the largest gang in the civilian area, was killed by Lin Sun." You mean Tiger Liu? Mu Wansu was shocked. Lin Sun is just a practitioner on the 5th level of martial realm. How could he kill a practitioner in the gang spirit realm? Wang Lin nodded and said, I also felt it was absurd, but then I thought it might have something to do with the mysterious spiritual tattooist behind Lin Sun. The existence who can refine the flaming spirit saber must be extraordinary. Such an explanation was reasonable, and even Mu Wansu couldn't help but be a little shaken. But the two didn't know that they had misunderstood, but it was understandable. The existence of Xia Ji had always seemed insignificant. After all, she was too young and rarely showed up in public, so no one cared about her. Besides, no one believed that a practitioner in the martial realm like Lin Sun could refine a spiritual weapon like the flaming spirit saber. So they subconsciously thought that there must be a master behind Lin Sun. This series of misunderstandings led to a lot of deviations. Under such circumstances, even though Wang Lin's information clearly stated that it was Lin Sun and Xia Ji who broke into the base of Black Tiger Gang, Wang Lin still directly ignored Xia Ji and put all the credit on the mysterious spiritual tattooist behind Lin Sun, because only in this way could it be reasonable. Mu Wansu's heart was in turmoil. Her reason told her that what Wang Lin said was all true. But when she thought of Lin Sun's hateful face, she felt depressed. Did she really have to bow her head to this shameless boy? By the way, did you help Lin Sun last night? Mu Wansu suddenly asked. Her words let Wang Lin know that Mu Wansu's mind had changed. He quickly nodded and said, It's not really a help. I just made up for my mistake. Did the boy appreciate it? Mu Wansu continued to ask. Wang Lin thought for a while and said, At least he didn't show any rejection or rejection. Mu Wansu nodded, and her clear eyes were full of thoughts. Lin Sun came to Donglin Town this time to take part in the county test. How about this, after the county test, invite him to meet me? Wang Lin suddenly hesitated and said, Miss Wansu, I'm afraid you have to go there in person. Mu Wansu was in a daze and then understood Wang Lin's meaning. She felt irritated and aggrieved. After a long time, she took a deep breath and said, Okay, I will take the initiative to visit him. She felt a little bitter in her heart. After all, she had to bow her head to that little bastard. But in next to no time, Mu Wansu pulled herself together and said to herself, If that little bastard thinks he can win just like that, then he's underestimating me too much. 3 days later, when Lin Sun completely repaired the severely damaged courtyard of his house, Xia Ji, who had been in the state of cultivation, also woke up. The first words she said when she opened her eyes were, I'm very hungry. Even so, Lin Sun was overjoyed, and the last bit of worry in his heart disappeared completely. He rushed into the kitchen and made delicious dishes for Xia Ji with all his skills. While eating, Lin Sun found that Xia Ji seemed to have changed slightly after waking up. There was a touch of ethereal, transcendent aura all over her body, which was hard to understand. You've become stronger? Lin Sun couldn't help asking. Yes, Xia Ji said vaguely while eating. This battle has helped me a lot in cultivation. If I deal with people like Tiger Liu again, it won't be as troublesome as last time. Lin Sun took a deep breath. The progress was more than just good, it was simply shocking. What about you? Xia Ji asked casually. Lin Sun immediately shut up and found it hard to speak. A bloody battle only made him have a deeper understanding of the 6-word saber play. Compared with Xia Ji, it was really embarrassing. Fortunately, Xia Ji was more interested in eating than Lin Sun, so she didn't ask again. Lin Sun secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said, Since you've woken up, I don't need to worry about anything. I may go to Donglin School later. County test will be held in 6 days. The registration has been opened in these 2 days, and the registration place is Donglin School. Xia Ji nodded and said, Remember, bring some books for me. I don't want those lousy novels about gods and monsters. The protagonists in them only know how to fight and kill. It's boring. Lin Sun agreed with a smile. Donglin School. The school, which used to be quiet, became extremely lively in these 2 days. Pedestrians and chariots could be seen bustling everywhere. A few students dressed in navy blue uniforms took on the role of attendants, helping to guide the way around the academy. The registration for County Test, an annual event in Donglin Town, would be held in these 2 days. As long as you pass County Test, you would be recognized by the Empire. Not only would you get a lot of money as a reward, but you would also be qualified to take part in State Test. Moreover, as long as you pass County Test, you would have the opportunity to be favored by other clans and forces. Maybe you could take advantage of this opportunity to soar to the sky and get many cultivation resources. Therefore, although everyone knew the content of County Test was very simple, no one dared to underestimate this way of selecting talents by the Empire. Just think about it. All the cultivators that were able to pass the test were all young men and young women below the age of 15 and possessed cultivation. They possessed cultivation potential that was difficult for ordinary people to reach, and if nothing unexpected happened in the future, they would surely be able to grow into true experts. Even if they had outstanding aptitude, their future in cultivation would be limitless. It was like a group of potential seedlings in the cultivation world. They seemed inconspicuous now, but they were destined to be extraordinary in the future. Therefore, when the annual county test was about to begin, the whole Donglin town would focus on it to see which lucky guy could pass the test. At the same time, it was also a chance for the major forces in Donglin town to recruit and absorb talents, and no one would miss it. When Lin Sun arrived at Donglin school, he saw such a lively scene. It was bustling with people, just like a market. Some boys and girls, even their whole families, accompanied them to sign up, which made Lin Sun sigh with emotion. How pitiful parents were. Indeed, in the whole Xiao Empire, the status and privileges of practitioners were far beyond that of ordinary people. But it was far from enough to be a practitioner. If one could become a practitioner recognized by the Empire, he would really bring honor to his ancestors. The strategy of selecting talents through the county test, state test, province test, and nation test was indeed far-sighted and wise. This was because just the yearly assessment and selection alone provided a large number of talents for the Empire, replenishing the Empire with fresh blood, thus allowing the Empire to become stronger day by day. Lin Sun didn't think so far ahead, but he also knew that this system of selecting talents was not simple. He was also looking forward to how far he could go in this kind of test. County test, state test, province test, or nation test. Chapter 90. The registration place for county test was on an open-air square in the center of Donglin School. Because of the large number of applicants, 36 registration offices were set up on the square, and the students in charge of registration were all from Donglin School. However, even with such a thoughtful arrangement, there was a long queue behind each registration office because of the large number of applicants. Seeing this, Lin Sun could only stand behind one of the registration offices and wait quietly. The registration was very simple. You only needed to pay 10 copper coins, and you could get a token to participate in county test. Suddenly, a burst of discussion attracted Lin Sun's attention. It's amazing. I heard that the host of this county test is His Excellency Yao Tuahai from Green Maple County. Who is he? Idiot. 30 years ago, His Excellency Yao Tuahai was 15 years old. It was a little late for him to participate in county test at this age. But His Excellency Yao Tuahai passed county test, state test, and province test in 1 year. More than that, when His Excellency Yao Tuahai participated in the nation test, he stood out among countless amazing people with unparalleled power. Although His Excellency Yao failed to enter Green Deer School for cultivation because of the gap of a fine line, His Excellency Yao Tuahai won the favor of the Prime Minister of the Empire because of his outstanding performance. Finally, His Excellency Yao Tuahai was promoted to serve in the center of the Empire and became famous all over the world. You know, for so many years, no one has passed the nation test in the southwest province of our empire. His Excellency Yao Tuahai can do this, which shows that he is a great talent. In the entire southwestern province, only Governor Liu Wujuan, who is in charge of the power of southwestern province, can be compared with Milord Yao. My God, since His Excellency Yao Tuahai is so powerful, Why did he choose to come to Donglin Town to preside over the county test? A big shot like him is absolutely qualified to preside over the province test. That's right. No one knows why Master Yao wants to come. That's why this year's county test has attracted so many practitioners to participate. I heard that some practitioners from nearby cities have also heard the news and are rushing over. Almost all of them want to participate in this year's county test, hoping to show their faces in front of Master Yao. If they can get Master Yao's appreciation, their future is just around the corner. Damn it, these fellows are dreaming. Alas, no matter what, with so many practitioners participating this year, the competition will be extremely fierce, and the final admission result is only 1,000 people. I'm afraid that even if some practitioners meet the requirements, they will be eliminated. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. He didn't expect that there would be so many changes in this county test. At the same time, the name of Yao Tuahai came into Lin Sun's sight for the first time. Hearing about the glorious deeds of Yao Tuahai, Lin Sun realized that Yao Tuahai, who had been favored by the Prime Minister of the Empire 30 years ago, was definitely an extremely powerful figure. And why did such a figure come to Donglin Town to preside over the county test in person? There must be a reason behind this. But Lin Sun didn't care about it. He was speechless when he heard the discussion just now. Because of the arrival of Yao Tuahai, the number of practitioners participating in the county test suddenly increased. Among them, there must be a lot of outstanding talents. It could be imagined how fierce the competition would be for the final admission. I'm now at the 6th level of Martial Realm, and I am less than 14 years old. I don't know if I can pass the county test. Lin Sun was full of confidence before, but now he was a little uncertain. The content of the county test was very simple. First, the age was required to be no more than 15 years old, and second, the cultivation was required. It could be said that the Xiozha who dared to participate in the county test must have fulfilled these two conditions. But because of the quota limit during the county test, only the best of the best would be chosen. Normal Xiozha were destined to be eliminated. Soon, Lin Sun came to the registration desk. Behind the registration desk sat 2 students of Donglin School, 1 male and 1 female. One was in charge of collecting the registration fee, the other was in charge of issuing tokens, and the other was in charge of recording the personal information of the applicants. After Lin Sun paid 10 copper coins, the female student sitting behind the registration desk raised her head and asked, "Please tell me your name and place of origin." Lin Sun said casually, "Lin Sun, from Feiyun Village in Donglin Town." As soon as the words came out, the male student in charge of issuing tokens suddenly raised his head and said, "You are Lin Sun?" The male student was handsome and talented, but his face was a little gloomy. He looked listless and absent-minded when issuing tokens just now. But at this time, his eyes became as sharp as a knife. He stared at Lin Sun with a very emotional look. But soon, he seemed to realize that he had lost his composure, so he withdrew his eyes and became calm again. "Do you know me, my friend?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and asked. Lin Sun's perception was extremely sharp. At that moment, the male student was not only emotional, but also had a hint of killing intent. Although he hid it very well, it couldn't be hidden from Lin Sun at all. "You mistook me for someone else." The male student shook his head and said in a cold voice. Lin Sun said with a smile, "That's really a coincidence." The male student handed a token to Lin Sun expressionlessly and said, "There are many coincidences in the world, and there are also many unfortunate ones. You'd better leave quickly and don't block others from coming to register." Lin Sun took the token and rubbed it in his hand for a while. Suddenly, he bent down and looked at the male student sitting behind the registration desk. He said with a smile, "There must be cause and effect between coincidences. My friend, I believe we will have a chance to meet again in the future." His words seemed to have a deep meaning. After saying that, he turned around and left with a smile. Until Lin Sun's figure disappeared, the male student's face became uncontrollably gloomy, and his eyes were full of coldness. "Lian Fei, what's wrong with you?" The female student next to him was a little surprised. Lian Fei's face was so ugly and unusual at the moment. "I'm fine." The male student shook his head and took a deep breath. Then he said with a smile, Susu, don't worry. Let's get on with our business. There are many people signing up today. We have to hurry. Okay. The female student nodded. She was not stupid. She had already noticed something from the scene just now. She thought to herself, is that the enemy Lin Fei has been dealing with these days? It turns out to be just a teenager. I thought he had 3 heads and 6 arms or something. Lin Fei never liked it when I interfered in his affairs. But this time, since I met him, how could I just watch him swallow his anger and humiliation? He is the man I like. Lin Fei. Walking out of Donglin School, Lin Sun kept recalling the appearance of the male student he saw just now. He had roughly figured out his identity. Lin Sun had few enemies in Donglin Town, and Lin Fei was the only enemy who cultivated in Donglin School. Lin Sun had never seen his appearance before, so he didn't recognize him at a glance. But today, he happened to meet his enemy. At that time, Lin Sun also wanted to kill him impulsively. But Lin Sun restrained himself in the end. Donglin School was heavily guarded, and there were many overmatches in the school. He couldn't act recklessly. However, since Lin Sun remembered his appearance, he could always find a chance to kill him in the future. Lin Sun was very clear that Lin Fei couldn't wait to kill him, the enemy who killed his father, right now. So Lin Sun would never give him a chance to take revenge. On the bustling and bustling street, pedestrians were weaving and rubbing shoulders. All kinds of voices rose and fell, making it noisy and lively. Many people were talking about the name Yao Tuahai. It could be said that Yao Tuahai was the most eye-catching person in Donglin Town today. The news that he would come to preside over the county test was like a storm, which shocked the whole town. Many people were guessing the real purpose of Yao Tuahai's coming. After all, it was a waste of Yao Tuahai's talent to be the chief examiner of the county test. Lin Sun didn't care too much about these. No matter how famous Yao Tuahai was, it had nothing to do with him. Before long, Lin Sun walked into Li's bookstore. After greeting the shopkeeper Uncle Li, who he was familiar with, Lin Sun began to pick out books, of course, for Xia Ji. When he left Li Ji's bookstore, it was still early. Lin Sun had a rare moment of leisure and relaxation. He wandered on the street and bought some delicious candied fruits, spiritual fruits, and roasted meat. In order to deal with the threats brought by the clan of Wu and Lin Fei, Lin Sun had been tense all the time. He seized all the time to prepare all kinds of means, so he hadn't stepped out of the civilian area for nearly half a month. Now that these threats had almost been temporarily removed, Lin Sun naturally wouldn't push himself too hard. In the way of cultivation, there was a balance between tension and relaxation. Overdoing it would be as bad as falling short. Before long, Lin Sun's eyes were attracted by a place called Donglin Martial Practice Hall on the side of the street, and he unconsciously stopped. Young hero, would you like to have a try? There's a spirit testing stone in our martial practice hall, which can accurately measure the level of your spiritual energy, which will be of great help to your future cultivation. A manservant with bright eyes quickly came up and invited warmly. In addition to the spirit testing stone, our martial practice hall also has a martial practice room specially prepared for practitioners, in which there are copper puppets of different levels, which can help you refine your martial power to your heart's content without being hurt. Oh, I can also refine my martial power? Lin Sun suddenly became interested. Seeing that Lin Sun seemed to be interested, the manservant quickly struck while the iron was hot and said, if you're not interested in these, there is another martial arts arena in our martial practice hall. If you participate in it, you can not only learn from other practitioners, but also win a lot of money if you win. Lin Sun was not interested in fighting in the arena, but he was interested in the spirit testing stone and the martial practice room. He was also very curious about the extent of his power now. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun casually threw 5 copper coins to the manservant and said, take me to see the spirit testing stone first. The manservant put away the money and said with a smile, okay, young hero, this way please. Chapter 91. The Donglin Martial Practice Hall occupied a large area and was divided into 3 areas, namely the martial practice room, the spirit testing hall, and the arena. The manservant led Lin Sun to walk in the hall. From time to time, they could see practitioners of all kinds, even some students wearing uniforms with the logo of Donglin School. However, most of them were on the 9th level of martial realm, and it was rare to see a practitioner in gang spirit realm. Obviously, though, the martial practice hall was large in scale, its main customers were practitioners in martial realm. Before long, Lin Sun entered the spirit testing hall under the guidance of the manservant. It was an extremely spacious hall, with a dark golden steel about 30 meters high standing in the center of the hall, emitting wisps of spiritual energy fluctuations. This was the spirit testing stone. It was said that it was a kind of spiritual weapon refined by a master in the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire, which could perfectly test the spiritual energy of a practitioner. Looking carefully, the surface of the spirit testing stone was marked with precise carvings, each of which represented a different meaning. Lin Sun noticed that each carving had a corresponding number, namely 100 June, 400 June, 600 June, 800 June, 1000 June, and so on. At this time, the manservant explained, "Young master, generally speaking, practitioners on the first level of martial realm have spiritual energy within 100 June. Practitioners on the second level of martial realm have spiritual energy within 400 June, and so on. Different practitioners have different levels of spiritual energy." Lin Sun then understood that the so-called June was a measure of spiritual energy. "Young master, if you want to have a test, you only need to pay 10 imperial silver coins," said the manservant. 10 imperial silver coins were 500 imperial copper coins, which was not a small amount. Lin Sun thought for a while and finally took out 10 imperial silver coins. For the sake of future cultivation, he really needed to know what level his spiritual energy had reached. The manservant took the money and left carefully, leaving the large spirit testing hall to Lin Sun alone, which was also to protect the privacy of the guests. After all, cultivation was related to the most fundamental power of a practitioner, and no one wanted to be spied on by others. Lin Sun was quite satisfied with this. He stepped forward and carefully looked at the spirit testing stone for a long time. Finally, he took a deep breath, ran all the spiritual energy in his body, and gently pressed his palm into a groove at the bottom of the spirit testing stone. Buzz! In the twinkling of an eye, a strange wave of power spread out from the spirit testing stone. Lin Sun felt as if his whole body was enveloped by a mass of water. Apart from that, he didn't feel any discomfort. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly lit up on the surface of the spirit testing stone and shot up in a perfectly straight line. In next to no time, it passed the 100 June, 400 June, 600 June, and 800 June inscriptions. Then, he continued to rise from the 800 June position. From 800 June to 1000 June, it meant that the practitioner had the spiritual power of the 5th level of martial realm. As to how strong the spiritual power was, it depended on the position between 800 June and 1000 June that the ray of light would stop at. If it happened to stay at 800 June, it could only be said that the strength of this practitioner on the 5th level of martial realm was too weak and mediocre. If it stayed at the position of 1000 June, it proved that the practitioner's inner strength had reached the peak of the 5th level of martial realm. Generally speaking, the strength of most practitioners on the 5th level of martial realm would hover between 800 June and 1000 June, either high or low. It was worth mentioning that this test standard was divided according to the strength possessed by most practitioners in the world. Although it was accurate, it only represented the strength of spiritual power, not the strength of cultivation. Soon, the ray of light rushed to the position of 1800 June, which meant that the spiritual power possessed by Lin Sun was already at the peak of the 6th level of martial realm in the world. However, it was not over yet. After the beam of light reached the 1800 June position, it did not slow down and continued to rise. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help feeling surprised. Between 1800 June and 3000 June was the spiritual power possessed by practitioners on the 7th level of martial realm in the world. Could it be that the strength he possessed was enough to compete with practitioners on the 7th level of martial realm? Before Lin Sun came to himself, he saw the ray of light kept rising and reached the position of 3,000 June in a few breaths. But it was not over yet. Before long, the ray of light rushed into the area between 3,000 June and 5,000 June, which belonged to the power possessed by practitioners on the 8th level of martial realm. However, when the ray of light reached this area, its rising speed gradually slowed down. Lin Sun forced himself to restrain his emotions and watched it carefully. Finally, the ray of light stopped at the position of 4,900 June and didn't rise anymore. This position represented the strength of Lin Sun's spiritual power, which was only a little bit away from the peak of the 8th level of martial realm, Great Zhou. But Lin Sun's current cultivation was only at the level of blood burning, the 6th level of martial realm, which was 2 levels lower than the 8th level of martial realm. It could be seen that Lin Sun could completely compete with the practitioners on the peak of the 8th level of martial realm in terms of the strength of his spiritual power, not to mention his cultivation. Seeing such a test result, Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder whether the spirit testing stone was broken. If all this was true, didn't it mean that in terms of the strength of his spiritual power, even ordinary practitioners on the 8th level of martial realm couldn't be his opponent? Ordinary practitioners on the 8th level of martial realm and those on the peak of the 8th level of martial realm were two different concepts. After thinking in silence for a long time, Lin Sun could only attribute all this to the 4 spiritual vortexes in the heart vessel and 4 acupoints. After being refined by the 4 vortexes, the spiritual power in his body became extremely pure and of superb quality. So the power it contained was naturally extremely terrifying. Now I have the strength of 4,900 June. When I reach the 6th level of martial realm, to what extent will my spiritual power be improved? Lin Sun walked out of the spirit testing hall while thinking. However, as soon as he went out, he saw the hall was in chaos and uproar. Immediately after, a group of soldiers clad in the Empire's standard heavy armor and surrounded by an austere aura rushed in to clear a path. Some practitioners couldn't dodge in time and were directly thrown out by those soldiers. In the blink of an eye, the team of soldiers opened a way in Donglin Martial Practice Hall. A tall and valiant lad in a scarlet cloak strode in. The lad had broad eyebrows, tiger-like eyes, and a slender and mighty figure. His every move revealed a domineering spirit. "Where is the spirit testing stone?" the valiant lad asked in a low voice. It's over there." A manservant was shocked by such a scene and stammered while pointing at the place behind Lin Sun. The valiant young man flipped his palm and flicked out a bright gold coin when he heard this, and then he tossed it to the attendant. "This is the fee. Use all the extra money to buy wine and entertain these brothers behind me." Saying this, he walked towards the spirit testing hall. Lin Sun moved his feet and calmly avoided the body, making way for the young man. The young man showed up with great momentum and obviously came from powerful background. Since he could take out a gold coin at will, he must be extremely rich. The lad glanced at Lin Sun and suddenly thought of something, saying, "Did you use the spirit testing stone just now?" Lin Sun nodded. "Judging from your age, you're only 13 or 14 years old. What realm have you reached in cultivation?" The lad's voice was deep and straightforward, which seemed rude. After all, it was a taboo for practitioners to directly inquire about each other's cultivation. But with curiosity in his eyes, he didn't seem to find fault with Lin Sun on purpose. Lin Sun thought for a while and said vaguely, "I have just stepped into the 6th level of martial realm, burning blood. I think I am far inferior to you." This was modesty, but the lad didn't seem to understand it. He nodded and said, "You know yourself well. I had reached the 9th level of martial realm when I was 9 years old. But for the sake of my future cultivation, my grandfather suppressed my cultivation for 4 years. Otherwise, I could have stepped into Gang Spirit Realm 4 years ago. In terms of cultivation speed, you really can't compare with me." Lin Sun was in a daze. This guy was so weird. He said this to a stranger when they met for the first time, and he looked serious as if he was praising himself, which was really weird. But through this guy's words, Lin Sun knew that this lad was the same age as him. only 13 years old. But this lad seemed to grow a little older. He didn't look like a 13-year-old at all, but 18 or 19 years old. Just as Lin Sun was thinking, the valiant lad had pushed the door open and walked into the spirit testing hall. On the other hand, the group of heavily armored soldiers stood guard outside, and they terrified everyone in the hall to the point that they didn't dare speak. Many people had left one after another. Lin Sun didn't stay any longer and walked towards the outside. He had planned to go to the martial practice room to have a look and experience the power of the so-called copper skin puppets. But he was disturbed by this matter and missed Xia Ji at home, so he didn't dare to stay any longer. That team of soldiers is full of murderous aura. Obviously, they have been through hundreds of battles. They are elites who have killed their way out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. And judging from the symbol on their heavy armor, they seem to be the soldiers of the famous Iron Blood Army of the Empire. Iron Blood Army of the Empire? Gosh, is it the Iron Blood Army under the command of the Iron Blood King, who is stationed on the western border of the Empire? Except for the Iron Blood King's subordinates. Who dares to wear this kind of heavy armor specially made for the Iron Blood Army? But who is that lad? How can he be guarded by a team of Iron Blood Army soldiers all the way? He must not be simple. Maybe he has something to do with the Iron Blood King. What I'm curious about is that the Iron Blood Army is stationed on the border of the Green Sand Province in the western border of the Empire, which is tens of thousands of miles away from our Donglin town. Now the soldiers of the Iron Blood Army appear in Donglin town. What are they going to do? Is something big going to happen? Before walking out of the gate of Donglin Martial Practice Hall, Lin Sun heard a burst of discussion, which made his heart skip a beat. Iron Blood King? Could it be Ning Bugue, the Iron Blood King who lives by fighting, rests his head on a mountain of corpses, and lies in a sea of blood, contrasting with the sky and sleeping with the earth? Lin Sun couldn't help but stop and turn his head to take a look at the team of soldiers inside. As expected, he found that these soldiers were all vigorous and brave, overflowing with murderous intent, with a kind of iron blood spirit of conquering the world. If they are really soldiers under the command of the Iron Blood King, the lad's background is even more extraordinary. Lin Sun thought for a while and then shook his head. He turned around and disappeared in the bustling street outside Donglin Martial Practice Hall. At the same time, in the spirit testing hall, the valiant lad's angry roar suddenly sounded. What a little liar! You obviously have the power of the peak of the 8th level of Martial Realm, but you lied to me that you're only on the 6th level of Martial Realm. Since I was a child, when did anyone dare to deceive me? Damn it, damn it! If Lin Sun returned, he would find that when he left the spirit testing hall, he forgot to erase the test record on the spirit testing stone because he had been thinking about the cultivation of spiritual energy. Unfortunately, this record caused the valiant lad who called himself Ning Meng to misunderstand. Chapter 92. Before going home, Lin Sun went to Golden Hall again. After selling a flaming spirit saber at a sky-high price, which caused a sensation in the whole city, Golden Hall was no longer deserted as it was at the beginning. It became crowded and extremely lively. Gu Yanping, who was skillful, trustworthy, and committed, soon gained a firm foothold in Donglin town, and his business was booming day by day. When Lin Sun learned all this, he couldn't help sighing with emotion. Gu Yanping was a strong practitioner in Gang Spirit Realm. Who could have thought that he was so good at business? When Lin Sun left Golden Hall, Gu Liang was already by his side. After killing Tiger Liu 3 days ago, Lin Sun completely emptied out all the treasures in Tiger Liu's underground treasure house. These treasures included gold, silver, jewelry, elixirs, spiritual materials, and ores, all of which were obtained by Tiger Liu's hard work over the past decades. Their value was amazing. However, after selecting, Lin Sun found that most of the items were useless. This time, he came to Golden Hall to sell these useless items. When Gu Yanping learned all this, he readily agreed and directly sent his son Gu Liang back home with Lin Sun to count the value of these items. Courtyard 49 of the civilian area. After spending the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Gu Liang finally counted all the items one by one and evaluated their specific value. 116 gold coins. Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. This was equivalent to 11,600 imperial silver coins, which was more than 16 million imperial copper coins. For Lin Sun, this was absolutely an astronomical figure, which could buy 30 or 40 flaming spirit sabers worth 300 imperial silver coins. From this, it could be seen how much wealth the Black Tiger Gang, as the first underground force in the civilian area, had plundered over the years. Most importantly, this was only the total value of some items that Lin Sun didn't need at all. In addition, some spiritual herbs, money, and spiritual materials that Lin Sun had already picked out added up to at least hundreds of imperial gold coins. In this regard, Lin Sun could only sigh again that war and looting were indeed one of the most effective means to accumulate wealth. Finally, under Lin Sun's insistence, 116 imperial gold coins were erased and turned into 100 imperial gold coins, and the transaction with Golden Hall was completed. Lin Sun's initiative to give up the value of 16 gold coins made Gu Liang very grateful and admire him. In his heart, he already regarded Lin Sun as a worthy friend. He promised Lin Sun that after Golden Hall sold all these items, he would send the money in person. Gu Liang had no choice. With the current financial resources of Golden Hall, they couldn't come up with 100 gold coins for the time being. Lin Sun was not in a hurry. After making the deal, he chatted with Gu Liang. Soon, Lin learned that the second flaming spirit saber given to Gu Yinping a few days ago was sold at the price of 200 silver coins, which was 100 silver coins cheaper than the first one. This was easy to understand. As the saying went, the rarer something was, the more valuable it was. Any treasure that was unique would be the most valuable. On the contrary, if there was a second or third treasure that was the same, then the price would drop. However, according to Gu Liang, even if there were more flaming spirit sabers on the market in the future, the final price would never be lower than 160 silver coins. Excluding the commission of Golden Hall, Lin Sun could get 110 silver coins in return. Lin Sun calculated in his heart that the cost of refining a flaming spirit saber was about 30 silver coins. In this way, as long as he sold a flaming spirit saber, he could earn more than 3 times the profit. Why were spiritual tattooists so aloof and highly respected? Because spiritual tattooists could create amazing wealth that could make many people jealous. What flowed out of each spiritual tattooist's fingers was not only spiritual tattoos, but also endless golden sand. At present, Lin Sun was not a spiritual tattooist because he couldn't inscribe a complete spiritual tattoo formation alone, so he was still a spiritual apprentice. However, relying on his true martial realm cultivation, he was able to refine a spirit weapon, which could be said to be unparalleled in the world, second to none. Fortunately, only Lin Sun and Xia Ji knew this secret. Otherwise, other spiritual tattooists in the world would be frightened. After all, who dared to believe that a teenager who was only 13 or 14 years old, who was far from practitioner of Gang Spirit Realm, had the ability to refine spiritual weapons? And if those spiritual tattooists knew that Lin Sun could not only refine spiritual weapons, but also had almost no failure rate, what would they think? Of course, if those spiritual tattooists further knew that the power of explosive flame saber refined by Lin Sun was 20% more than usual, what would they think? Lin Sun was no longer a fledgling. He deeply understood the meaning of making a fortune in silence, so he would not tell these secrets. But it was hard to keep this secret. Just at this time, Gu Liang suddenly said, "Lin Sun, there's an ancient mark of Sun on the second flaming spirit saber, which is obviously unique to spiritual tattooists. As long as you see this mark, you will know it is a masterpiece of a spiritual tattooist." Speaking of this, Gu Liang looked at Lin Sun with some surprise and doubt. "Is the mark of Sun, do you think I can do it with my ability?" Lin Sun asked with a smile. Gu Liang hesitated for a long time and finally shook his head. "It can't be you. Although there are examples of spiritual apprentices in the real martial realm who can refine spiritual weapons, they are extremely rare. Besides, those spiritual apprentices all come from ancient big forces, so it's rare to see them." After a pause, He continued, "The most important thing is that the two flaming spirit sabers are very unique. Although they're made of the same materials and spiritual tattoos as the ordinary explosive flame sabers, their power is obviously different. They are a completely new kind of spiritual weapons. Such a treasure can only be refined by those great spiritual tattooists with extraordinary attainments." His words showed that even if Lin Sun admitted that the two treasures were made by him, Gu Liang would never believe it. But this was a good thing for Lin Sun, because he didn't have to spend time to weave a lie to cover it up. Lin Sun said with a smile, "Gu Liang, you don't have to guess anymore. I can't say anything else, but I can guarantee that as long as I am in Donglin Town, I will provide some spiritual weapons for Golden Hall." Gu Liang was still hesitating to ask which spiritual tattooist made the two flaming spirit sabers, but after hearing Lin Sun's words, he suddenly understood that this was Lin Sun's secret. Even if he asked, Lin Sun would never reveal it. On the other hand, it could also be judged from this sentence that Lin Sun should have a close relationship with the mysterious spiritual tattooist. Otherwise, he would never dare to make such a guarantee. At the thought of this, Gu Liang couldn't help but envy Lin Sun's good luck. Who wouldn't envy a mysterious spiritual tattooist? But Gu Liang probably didn't expect that Lin Sun's words would completely lead him astray. After chatting for a while, Gu Liang left. Sitting alone in the courtyard, Lin Sun slightly narrowed his eyes and fell into contemplation. Since he entered Donglin Town, too many things had happened in less than a month, and almost all of them were related to Clan of Wu. First, he was assassinated by Black Widow and the other two, and then he was threatened by the Black Tiger Gang, which made Lin Sun's life quite uneasy during this period. Fortunately, these things had passed. After suffering two painful lessons in a row, Clan of Wu dared not act recklessly for the time being. But the threat still existed, and Lin Sun would not be careless. He knew very well that as long as he was still alive, he would still suffer the revenge from Clan of Wu sooner or later. Fortunately, now he had established a deep relationship with Golden Hall, and through Wang Lin's mouth a few days ago, he also released some kind of signal to Mu Wansu. So Mu Wansu would definitely take this opportunity to re-examine her attitude towards him. In short, at present, Lin Sun didn't have to worry about anything before the county test began, and he could spare more time for cultivation. Indeed, compared with those trivial things, Lin Sun cared more about his own path of cultivation. As long as he was strong enough, all conspiracies and tricks were just a joke. Now, Lin Sun had just reached the 6th level of martial realm, and it would be difficult for him to make another breakthrough in a short time. At the 6th level of martial realm, the spiritual energy could circulate 108 times in the body, which was called one circulation. The blood all over the body was like a boiling furnace, burning fiercely. The 7th level of martial realm was the level of small circulation. At this level, the spiritual energy all over the body could continuously circulate for 9 whole circulations. At that level, the spiritual energy in the body would change by leaps and bounds, and the practitioner would begin to explore the wonderful method of small circulation. At present, Lin Sun was still far away from the small circulation, and it was indeed not possible to make a breakthrough in a short time. As for the cultivation of his spirit, Lin Sun's perception had improved significantly after the refining of meditating magic. It wouldn't be long before he could light up the 3rd spiritual star in his sea of consciousness. In this aspect, Lin Sun didn't need to worry at all. Like the cultivation of his spirit, the strength of his body was constantly strengthened under the refining of the heaven-accessing place every 3 days. Now, Lin Sun's body could be described as copper skin and iron bones, which could hardly be hurt by ordinary knives and swords. In a word, since the sequelae on the heart vessel and 4 acupoints were no longer there, Lin Sun seemed to have changed his fate and been reborn. No matter in any aspect of cultivation, his potential broke out beyond the imagination of ordinary people, which enabled Lin Sun to have today's achievements. The only knot in Lin Sun's heart now was that he still hadn't found out any information about the enemy who dug away his spiritual vein. From the first day he entered Donglin Town, he often went to the bookshops in the city to read some ancient books, trying to find some records about the devouring abyss. Unfortunately, he got nothing, because the devouring abyss was a kind of spiritual vein, and the so-called spiritual vein was a kind of inborn cultivation talent. There were so many practitioners in the world, but those who had the spiritual vein were absolutely few and extremely rare. It could be said that 1 in 10,000 was as rare as a phoenix feather or a unicorn horn. Under such circumstances, the number of books related to origin spirit veins naturally became even rarer. Donglin Town was just a remote border city in the southwestern province of the empire. It was conceivable how little hope it was to find the information about the devouring abyss from here. Chapter 93. There were only 5 days left before the county test. Lin Sun still practiced as usual, practicing martial arts in the daytime and refining his spiritual energy, soul, and spiritual tattoos at night. He didn't change or adjust the pace of his life because of the coming county test. He seemed quite calm and composed. After Ji woke up from her serious injuries, she slept during the day and went out alone at night, as usual. Lin Sun didn't need to guess to know that every time the little girl went out at night, a gang in the civilian area would suffer. In general, Courtyard 49 seemed to be the same as before. But in Donglin Town, many big events happened in recent days, which shocked the whole town. First of all, Yao Tuahai, the famous big shot, was now in Donglin Town and would take the post of chief examiner to preside over the coming county test. Because of Yao Tuahai's arrival, the number of practitioners participating in the county test suddenly soared. Before the test began, the number of applicants had exceeded 8,000. Only about half of them were local practitioners in Donglin Town, while the other half were practitioners from other cities, all of whom admired Yao Tuahai's reputation. Because of this, Donglin Town suddenly became livelier than before. Almost everyone on the streets and alleys was talking about the reason why Yao Tuahai did this. At the same time, the news that the members of the Blood Army in the western border of the empire escorted a mysterious lad to Donglin Town made a big stir in the already gossipy Donglin Town. The Blood Army. This was an elite troop famous in the empire, under the command of Ning Buge, the Blood King of the military headquarters of the empire. Ning Buge was a legendary overmatch in the empire, and the Blood Army was a legendary troop in the army of the empire. Today, a team composed of members of the Blood Army escorted a lad to Donglin Town, which could be imagined what a big stir it would cause. Why did the members of the Blood Army appear here? Why did they escort the lad here? Everyone was guessing and discussing, but no one could give an accurate answer. Even the well-informed superpowers in Donglin Town were confused and at a loss about what to do. Yao Tuahai came to preside over the county test in Donglin Town, but everyone knew that his real purpose was certainly not so simple. The Blood Iron Warriors had arrived, and they had even escorted a youth here. This made it even more difficult to guess what they were going to do. All of this covered the situation in Donglin Town with a layer of confusing colors and made the atmosphere in Donglin Town treacherous. Keystone business. Mu Wansu stared blankly. Her pair of beautiful brows had suddenly knit together tightly, and she seemed to be laden with worries. In her hand, there was an urgent intelligence sent a few hours ago. The intelligence came from the headquarters of Keystone Business in the forbidden city of the capital. But there was only one sentence in the intelligence. A big shot will arrive in Donglin Town soon. Remember to be careful. Because of this sentence, Mu Wansu became restless. Who exactly was this great figure? Why did the headquarters of Keystone Business in the forbidden city of the capital send such an urgent intelligence? In fact, they didn't even dare to mention the name of that big shot in the report. Mu Wansu's intuition told her that this was not a simple matter. She thought of Yao Tuahai, who suddenly appeared in Donglin Town and wanted to preside over the county test in person. She also thought of the youth who was escorted to Donglin Town by the Blood Iron Warriors. Could it be that they all came for this big shot? Realizing this, Mu Wansu couldn't help but take a deep breath. Yao Tuahai's identity was extremely powerful. In the whole southwest province of the empire, only Governor Lu Wujuan could keep pace with Yao Tuahai. And the identity of the youth who was escorted by the Blood Iron Warriors was even more unusual. The Blood Iron Warriors were the fierce troops under the command of Ningbu Gue. But this youth could be escorted by the Blood Iron Warriors. How could his identity be ordinary? If they all came for the big shot, it could be inferred how horrible the identity of the big shot was. But why did such a big shot come to Donglin Town? The more Mu Wansu thought about it, the more restless she became. For the first time, she felt that she couldn't see through the situation in Donglin Town. In the early morning 4 days later, after breakfast, Lin Sun didn't practice again. He felt that his physical cultivation had reached a bottleneck again. He planned to go to Donglin Martial Practice Hall to test his physical strength. Leaving the civilian area and walking into the bustling street, Lin Sun clearly felt that Donglin Town had become more and more lively than before. Practitioners could be seen everywhere, and people were talking about the county test everywhere. Because tomorrow morning, the county test would begin in Donglin School. Lin Sun didn't worry about anything about the county test. He had made preparations, and the only thing left was to wait for the test to begin. Before long, Lin Sun came to Donglin Martial Practice Hall. After paying 10 imperial silver coins, he was led into the martial practice room by a manservant respectfully. The martial practice room was very spacious, like a small martial practice field, and there were many copper puppets distributed in it. The so-called copper puppets, in essence, were a kind of spiritual weapon integrated with mechanism skills. The bodies of the puppets were made of hard spiritual materials and ores. Finally, a spiritual tattooist inscribed a unique spiritual tattoo pattern inside the puppets. Then, the puppets could move autonomously through the internal mechanisms and spiritual energy source. Some of the more powerful copper skin puppets could even fight like real Xiozha. However, the copper puppets in Donglin Martial Practice Hall were just common goods and could only carry out some simple actions. Their biggest function was to test the martial power of practitioners. At the same time, when Lin Sun entered Donglin Martial Practice Hall, in the depths of the 3,000 mountains thousands of miles away from Donglin Town, the mountains were dense and the sea of clouds was steaming. Suddenly, under the blue sky, a strange team appeared. In front of the team, there was a group of men in imperial court dress. But the color of their dress was not lavender, but a kind of deep black like the night. There were 16 men in total, leading the way in 2 rows. Their bearing was solemn and solemn. Even if they were walking in the sky and clouds, they still maintained a strict, neat posture. It seemed as if they weren't stepping on clouds in the sky, but a flat and solid path instead. Every single step they took and every single tiny movement they made maintained a unique rhythm, and it was orderly and exactly the same. Only Sea Spirit Realm cultivators could fly in the sky, but not all Sea Spirit Realm cultivators could maintain the strength to walk in the clouds. Even if they could walk in the clouds, they might not be able to maintain the same pace and speed as the 16 men in black court attire, who were all moving at the same pace and at a speed that was as precise as a ruler. But such 16 men, who had obviously reached the Sea Spirit Realm and possessed horrible strength, were just playing the role of Pathfinder for a team at the moment. Because behind them, there was a carriage. The carriage was black, and no one knew what material it was made of. Its surface was engraved with dense and obscure spiritual tattoos. Under the blue sky, it was covered with a layer of dark and deep breath like the eternal night. Pulling the carriage were 6 black horses. Their eyes were dark green like willow, the wisps, and there was a single horn on their heads. They looked very much like the legendary unicorns. However, unicorns were white, while these 6 black horses were pure black. They looked like ghost horses that had escaped from hell. Above the luxuriant mountains and beneath the dark blue sky, a group of people in black court attire and a black carriage that was as deep as the eternal night had suddenly appeared. Such a scene was truly horrifying, and it seemed unreal as if it was an illusion. Screech! Suddenly, a loud cry sounded in the far sky, shaking the sky. In just a moment, a black shadow rushed over and came to the side of the carriage. It was a strange black bird with 4 claws, black iron-like wings, and golden eyes. It seemed to be small, but it exuded a terrible and fierce aura. However, in just a moment, with a bang, the strange black bird suddenly exploded and turned into a tall and slender old man in a black court dress, with his long hair combed neatly. "Miss, I have been searching for a long time, but I haven't found any clues. It should be that someone deliberately destroyed all the traces. We came too late." The old man bowed slightly. His voice was mellow, and his manner was polite, perfect and impeccable. "Well," in the black carriage, a unique, hoarse female voice full of unique magnetism came. "It's already expected. I'm very surprised that they could endure until now for what happened in the past." The old man was silent. After a while, the hoarse magnetic voice in the black carriage sounded again. "The flamen once said that there is a peerless treasure in the 3,000 mountains. Have you heard it?" The old man bowed and said, "Yes, it said that young Sword King Shai Yutong has confirmed that it doesn't exist." "Oh, is it the little guy from the Xie family in Wui Alley of the Forbidden City?" "Yes. He is also a person with good luck." Speaking of this, the hoarse magnetic voice suddenly paused. Immediately, the curtain on one side of the black carriage was lifted and a white and beautiful hand stretched out. This hand was exquisite, slender, and flawless. On the little finger that had impeccable lines, there was a ring inlaid with a strange black gem. It was like an open black vertical eye, and it caused one to shudder with fear. The beautiful hand pointed to the distance. "What's ahead?" The old man said, "Miss, ahead is Donglin Town, one of the destinations of our trip. According to the current speed, we can arrive in 6 hours." Donglin Town. Interesting. The hoarse magnetic voice seemed a little erratic, but also seemed to perceive something, which was hard to understand. Chapter 94. There were 9 copper-skinned puppets in the martial practice room, which corresponded to the strength standard of each level of the 9 levels of the martial realm. It was worth mentioning that the copper-skinned puppets were different from the spirit testing stone. The spirit testing stone tested the spiritual energy of the practitioner, while the copper-skinned puppets tested the martial power of the practitioner. This was easy to understand. Having spiritual power cultivation did not necessarily mean that one would be able to display the corresponding battle power. The exertion of the fighting power was often closely related to the martial cultivation method in the realm of the practitioner. After all, a fight was a fight, and the cultivation was only a source of power for the fight. If one wanted to exert the power, he must be assisted by the fighting cultivation method. Lin Sun walked to a copper-skinned puppet marked blood burning, the 6th level of the martial realm, and patted its chest where the heart was. With a buzzing sound, the copper-skinned puppet's eyes lit up with a red light, as if waking up from a deep sleep. Every inch of its body was glowing brightly. Lin Sun took a deep breath, and every inch of his muscles suddenly became as condensed as well-tempered steel wire. His physical strength expanded like a horned dragon, roaring up and down his body along his spine. At this moment, even Lin Sun's breath faintly contained a fierce momentum of wind and thunder. Boom! He suddenly stretched out his right arm and grasped the copper-skinned puppet's wrist as fast as lightning. The power that had been accumulated for a long time poured out like a flood, producing a terrible shock force. This was one of the moves of separating tendons and dislocating bones, which could dislocate the opponent's joints in an instant, shatter the opponent's whole strength, and make him lose his fighting power completely. In severe cases, it could even shatter the opponent's internal organs and kill him with one blow. Boom! With a loud bang, the copper-skinned puppet, which could withstand a full blow from a practitioner on the 6th level of the martial realm, suddenly burst into pieces like a piece of paper. The parts scattered all over the ground, and only one arm was grasped by Lin Sun. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun was stunned. Wasn't it too weak to fight? Originally, Lin Sun had a general speculation that he should be able to fight with a practitioner on the 6th level of the martial realm only by virtue of his physical strength. After all, these days, he would enter the heaven-accessing place every 3 days. Although he failed every time, it had a great effect on refining and improving his physique. Until now, Even Xia Ji once said that Lin's progress in body refining was definitely faster than his spiritual power cultivation. But Lin still didn't expect that he could smash a copper skin puppet on the 6th level of martial realm with just one blow. Of course, this was a test of the power of martial arts. Even so, Lin Sun's physical strength with the help of separating tendons and dislocating bones was beyond his expectation. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun came to another copper skin puppet, which was on the 7th level of martial realm. This time, Lin Sun changed his strategy. With a simple punch, he used the most direct technique to exert force. Boom! The copper skin puppet was sent flying. At the same time, its chest caved in deeply and a striking fist imprint appeared. At the same time, with a tinkle, a voice came from the copper skin puppet. Congratulations, my guest. Your martial strength can threaten a practitioner on the 7th level of martial realm. Looking at his fist, Lin Sun pondered for a long time and then turned around and walked out of the martial practice room. But when Lin Sun left, he had to pay a high price of 100 imperial silver coins of compensation for completely destroying a copper skin puppet. Although Lin Sun had become rich now, 100 imperial silver coins was still a big expense. Lin Sun couldn't help complaining in his heart. If he had known this, he would have directly taken the copper skin puppet on the 7th level of martial realm for the test. But all in all, Lin Sun was quite happy when he found out that his physical strength could threaten a practitioner on the 7th level of martial realm. Of course, this was only a test of martial arts power. In a real battle, the situation was ever-changing. Moreover, the amount of combat experience a practitioner had, the quality of the equipment he wore, and the power of the cultivation method he practiced were all important factors that affected the outcome of battle. Now, I have 4,900 June of spiritual energy, which is enough to compete with a practitioner on the peak of the 8th level of martial realm, and my physical strength can already threaten a practitioner on the 7th level of martial realm. As long as I keep practicing diligently, there may be unexpected benefits when I reach the gang spirit realm. After walking out of Donglin Martial Practice Hall, Lin Sun summarized the strength he possessed in his heart and rushed home. Tomorrow was the county test, so he was not in the mood to wander around. But when he arrived at Courtyard 49, Lin Sun suddenly heard a burst of curses coming from his own yard. Damn it! I'm the young master of Shui Family Martial Club in Donglin Town. How dare you bully me like this? You're courting death. Let us go. Wait and see. You're in big trouble, and no one in Donglin Town can save you. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and pushed the door open. Immediately, he saw more than 10 teenagers in luxurious clothes, who were tied up like prisoners and lying on the ground in a mess. All of them had bloody noses, swollen faces, and disheveled hair, which made them look miserable. In the center of the courtyard, Xia Ji was sitting by herself, quietly reading a book, as if she didn't hear these curses at all. Beside Xia Ji stood Fatty Jiao and the Bones, but both of them looked a little bitter, as if they had lost their wits. What's wrong? Lin Sun frowned. You tell him that I'm a little sleepy and go to bed. Xia Ji closed the book, told Fatty Jiao and the Bones, and then turned around and walked into the room. Lin Sun glanced at Fatty Jiao, who immediately came forward and narrated all this with a sad face. It turned out that not long after Lin Sun left home in the morning, these teenagers came to him, claiming that they were from Donglin School. Somehow they heard that Lin Sun's fighting capacity was quite good, so they clamored to have a competition with Lin Sun to see who was better. Xia Ji originally didn't want to bother with them, but who would have thought that they wouldn't let it go? Their words also became unpleasant, and they said some contemptuous and insulting words. As a result, Xia Ji was immediately angered, so she attacked and took them all down. If Fatty Jiao and the Bones hadn't come in time, Xia Ji would have almost killed these students of Donglin School. Knowing all this, Lin Sun's eyes suddenly narrowed. The county test would be held tomorrow, but more than a dozen students of Donglin School came to his home and wanted to challenge him. It was a little strange in any way. Could it be a conspiracy? Lin Sun thought of Lien Fei, who was hiding in Donglin School. He was even sure that even if it was not Lien Fei's idea, it must have something to do with him. You are Lin Sun? Hurry up and let us go. Otherwise you, a wild boy from the countryside, can't bear the consequences. Untie me. Seeing Lin Sun coming back, the students of Donglin School not only didn't stop abusing him, but also became more arrogant with all kinds of dirty words, as if they were not afraid that Lin Sun dared to kill them. A chill flashed in the deep of Lin Sun's eyes, but a bright smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he walked over. Boss, please calm down. Fatty Jiao hurried forward and whispered anxiously. We have just inquired about the good news. These guys seem to be just students of Donglin School, but their backgrounds are not simple. Almost all of them are playboys from big families in Donglin Town. We can't kill them, or there will be endless troubles in the future. Oh, Lin Sun was silent. When they saw this, the 10-plus young men in luxuriously dressed clothes that were beaten to the point they had bruises on their faces became even more fearless and complacent. What? Are you afraid? I don't think you dare to do anything to us. Humph, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and untie this young master. These teenagers were all very young. The youngest was only 11 or 12 years old, and the oldest was no more than 15 years old. They were all arrogant and obviously had never experienced any setbacks. They dared to be so arrogant because they were spoiled. Lin Sun no longer remained silent. He went forward and squatted in front of a teenager with a smile, saying, Who sent you here? What a joke. Who in Donglin Town can order me around? Don't talk nonsense. If you don't let us go, you will suffer endless hardships in the future. The teenager raised his head like a proud rooster, but his cheeks were red and swollen like a pig's head, and his eyes were blue and purple, which looked quite funny. Crack! Lin Sun slapped him directly. The teenager screamed and passed out with his neck crooked. This scene shocked a group of teenagers nearby, and they all became stiff. They didn't expect that Lin Sun dared to hurt people at this time. Wasn't he afraid that they would get even with him later? Boss, this. Fatty Jiao and the Bones were also a little confused when they saw this. This guy is full of sh*t and dirty words. He is so uncultured. Lin Sun shook his head as if nothing had happened. Then he looked at another teenager with a smile and said, You, tell me who sent you here. That teenager was obviously frightened by Lin Sun's means and said with a frightened face, We came here of our own initiative. We absolutely didn't lie. Lin Sun frowned and looked at other teenagers. Seeing that they all looked the same, he knew that such playboys who had never experienced setbacks would not lie. It could be seen from their expressions that they didn't even cover up their emotions. It was an exaggeration to say that they were simple-minded. Lin Sun stood up and thought for a while. Then he turned around and called Fatty Jiao and the Bones to one side, whispering, Call some people to tie these guys up and send them to the gate of Donglin School. Fatty Jiao gasped and said in shock, Absolutely not. If this thing gets out of hand, the consequences will be unimaginable. Lin Sun's delicate and warm face was full of smiles, and he said slowly, It has to get out of hand. Otherwise, even if we let them go now, there will be countless troubles in the future. Speaking of this, he touched his chin and said thoughtfully, At that time, I need you to put on a show together. If this thing is not made known to the whole town, no one can live in peace in the future. Looking at Lin Sun's serious look, Fatty Jiao and the Bones finally realized that their boss Shuangmu was not joking. Chapter 95. Donglin School. Lian Fei found Yao Susu angrily and said, I heard that Yang Kun gathered a group of students to pick a fight with Lin Sun. Did you do it? Yao Susu didn't seem to care and nodded casually. Although I didn't do it, I did have something to do with it. I just told Yang Kun that Lin Sun was a young genius and often looked down upon the students of Donglin School as inferior. I didn't like it. Lian Fei's face darkened. Then Yang Kun couldn't stand the provocation and went to compete with Lin Sun. Yao Susu laughed. Yes, Yang Kun is impatient and pompous. He can't stand the provocation. I didn't provoke him much, and he went to compete with Lin Sun with his students. Stupid. Lian Fei felt a headache. He was really angry, but he couldn't be angry with Yao Susu. His face darkened. Lin Sun can kill Tiger Liu. How can he be compared with ordinary people? Yang Kun and others are no match for Lin Sun at all. Isn't it asking to be humiliated? Yao Susu said, I don't expect them to teach Lin Sun a lesson. On the contrary, the worse they lose, the better. Lin Fei was in a daze and keenly realized that it might not be as simple as he thought. As expected, the next moment Yao Susu said, although Yang Kun and others are pompous and domineering, each of them comes from the major forces in Donglin Town. If Lin Sun offends them, he offends these forces. Isn't it better? It's better than being Lin Sun's enemy alone, isn't it? Lin Fei's anger dissipated more than half. He said thoughtfully, Are you going to frame Lin Sun? Yao Susu curled her lips and said, If it weren't for you, I wouldn't do such a dirty thing. Lin Fei quickly comforted her and was quite moved. Susu, I'm just a little worried about you. Lin Sun is cruel and ruthless. How can I bear to see you being hated by such a wolf cub? Yao Susu laughed. Don't worry about me. I'm not afraid of Lin Sun. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know such a person exists. Lin Fei suddenly realized a problem. By the way, how did you know about the hatred between me and Lin Sun? Yao Susu smiled proudly and said, As long as I want to know something, no one can hide it from me. Well, don't worry about it. Let's just wait and watch the fun. Tomorrow is the county test. If Yang Kun and others are seriously injured and can't participate in the test, it will inevitably cause the anger of many forces. At that time, Lin Sun won't be able to jump around for a few days. Lin Fei thought for a while and couldn't help sighing inwardly. Yao Susu seemed to be an innocent girl, but who could imagine that she was so scheming? However, Lin Fei couldn't help but be excited when he thought that Lin could fall into a murderous predicament after this. He didn't forget the frustration and grievance he suffered a few days ago. A hubbub suddenly sounded from afar, causing Lin Fei and Yao Susu to look up subconsciously. A group of students hurriedly ran out of the academy, and there were even people shouting on the way. Let's go and take a look. Someone from our academy has been beaten up and is even tied up and escorted to the entrance of the academy. Damn it! How dare he bully our Donglin school? I like to see who is the lawless and arrogant guy. The sound of discussion made Lin Fei and Yao Susu stunned at the same time. How could things go to such an extent? How dare Lin Sun be so arrogant? Not only did he bully Yang Kun and others, but he also wanted to make trouble in Donglin school. They looked at each other and rushed to the entrance of the academy to find out the truth. It was noon, but the gate of Donglin school was crowded with people. Many onlookers gathered around and blocked the huge gate of the school. On the open space in front of the academy, there were more than a dozen figures lying on the ground. All of them were tied up, with bruises and swollen faces, disheveled hair and mouths stuffed with smelly rag. They looked extremely miserable. Of course, these were the playboys who went to Courtyard 49 to make trouble today. Beside them, there were dozens of old men and women who were dressed in rags and had grizzled hair. At this moment, they were wailing loudly with tears streaming down their faces. Fatty Jiao and the Bones were also among them. At this time, Fatty Jiao shouted angrily, Dear folks, we are forced to a dead end today. We have to come here to seek justice. Even if we are beaten to death by Donglin School, we still have to say something. Fatty Jiao shouted angrily. These scum of Donglin School on the ground came to the civilian area to make trouble today. They said that they wanted to hone their martial cultivation and prepare for tomorrow's county test. So they beat everyone they see and hurt many of our friends and relatives. They are cruel, vicious, unscrupulous, and lawless. I want to ask, is there any law in the world? Fatty Jiao was full of righteous indignation and passionate. His voice was so loud that everyone nearby could hear it clearly, which made the crowd burst into an uproar. They have gone too far. Fatty Jiao looked very agitated. With tears in his eyes, he pointed to an old woman whose teeth were all gone and said, Look, this is the old mother of my neighbor, Go Sheng. She is so old, but she was almost defiled. Hearing this, the crowd burst into an uproar. Defiled? Who the hell would be blind to defile an old woman? However, Fatty Jiao looked very sad. He gnashed his teeth and came to a young man who was tied up on the ground. He said excitedly, "You may not believe it, but I swear to God that it's this guy. He may be young, but his taste is very heavy. If I hadn't arrived at Go Sheng's house in time, he would have raped Go Sheng's old mother." The teenager on the ground was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He struggled to say something, but his mouth was stuffed with a stinky rag, so he could only make a whimper. And the old woman also knelt down and kowtowed very cooperatively. Her head was broken and bleeding, which was shocking to see. People nearby could not help but wonder if it was true. Before they could figure out, Fatty Jiao pounded his chest and cried to the sky, "Believe me, we are all poor people living at the bottom of the civilian area. If we were not driven to a dead end by these scums, how dare we come to the gate of Donglin School to cry our grievances?" Hearing this, the crowd nodded secretly. Yes, these people seemed to be nobodies who lived at the bottom all year round. According to common sense, they would not dare to come to Donglin School to make trouble, even if they were very bold. There must be a reason. At this time, many students had gathered in front of the gate of Donglin School. Seeing a group of schoolmates tied on the ground, they all looked angry. But after all, they were too young to have experienced such a fight. After hearing Fatty Jiao's bitter and desperate cry, they could not help but wonder if it was true. Some people wanted to come forward and rescue Yang Kun and the others, but they were stopped by a group of old women and old men who seemed to say, "If you dare to rescue them, you must step over our dead bodies." These old men and old women had no cultivation. They were all ordinary people, and they were so old that they had one foot in the coffin. It would be too troublesome if they were hurt under the watchful eyes of so many people. It would also be bad for the reputation of Donglin School. In the future, people might say that students of Donglin School only bullied the old, which would be a great shame. Today, I will come to Donglin School to seek justice at the risk of my life. Fatty Jiao began to roar again. "Yes, seek justice." The Bones also shouted at the top of his voice. "I heard from these scums that they were instigated by a student named Lin Fei to deliberately go to the civilian area to make trouble. They said that people living in the civilian area were not human and their lives were as cheap as paper. No one would care if they killed them at will. Isn't it disregarding human life?" Seeing that the Bones could even call out the name of the instigator, the onlookers became more and more suspicious. At this time, Lin Fei and Yao Susu arrived at the gate of the school and happened to hear this. Lin Fei was immediately dumbfounded. When did I say such idiotic words? Lin Fei's face became gloomy. At the sight of this, he knew that this was a revenge deliberately arranged by Lin Sun. Damn it! Lin Fei was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He didn't do anything, but the sh*T was put on his head. However, he didn't know how to explain it at the moment. As the saying goes, the mouth of the masses can melt gold. Yao Susu's face was also very gloomy. She never thought that Lin Sun was so treacherous and cunning, and his reaction was so fast. He not only beat Yang Kun and the others violently, but also made up a cover and brought this matter to Donglin School. Even if it was proved later that all this was a lie, who would believe it at that time? Even Yao Susu could imagine that once this matter was spread out, it would be exaggerated by many people to make it even more outrageous. This was the rumor, a groundless thing. After being processed by people with evil intentions, it would be spread into various stunning versions. The more you explained, the more they would doubt the rumor was true. Fatty Jiao and the Bones were still crying angrily. They had thrown caution to the wind and knew that the bigger the trouble was, the safer they would be. So they tried their best to put sh*T on Lin Fei. As time went on, more and more onlookers gathered. At a place 300 meters away from Donglin School, Lin Sun watched all this from a distance. Finally, he smiled silently and turned away. The matter had been blown up. No matter what the final result was, at least the sensation caused by this matter was enough to make the forces behind those childs worry for a while. If they really dared to deal with Lin Sun at all costs, it would completely prove that all the rumors were true. This result was certainly not what the big shots behind those childs wanted. Fatty Jiao and the Bones have good acting skills. It's rare that they suddenly thought of blackmailing a group of old people. This idea is so good that the practitioners of Donglin School can't do anything rash. But they will definitely be hated to the bones in the future, and I'm afraid that they can't stay in Donglin Town anymore. It seems that I have to find a way out for them as soon as possible. As he walked, Lin Sun was thinking calmly. Today's farce was indeed created by him. Although the immediate danger was temporarily solved, sooner or later, it would be found out that he was the manipulator behind the scenes. But Lin Sun didn't care about this. When the county test was over, he would naturally choose to leave Donglin Town, a troublesome place, and go to Green Maple County to prepare for the state test in March next year. Chapter 96. Not long after Lin Sun left, the farce in front of Donglin School became bigger and bigger, and more onlookers gathered. Seeing the situation was getting out of control, a teacher of Donglin School finally came out in person to control the situation. This teacher was a senior practitioner in Gang Spirit Realm and had a good reputation. He made a statement in public to give justice to Fatty Jiao and his fellows. Fatty Jiao knew when to stop. Knowing that it would be disadvantageous for him if he continued to make trouble, he left in a hurry with a group of old men and women. And Yang Kun and other playboys who had been tied up and escorted were also rescued one by one and brought back to Donglin School. Although the incident was over, the rumor about it spread throughout Donglin Town in the shortest time, causing a lot of uproar and laughter. And Lin Fei and Yang Kun and their fellows were completely reduced to a laughingstock. Of course, no one cared whether the rumor was true or false. Even if it was not the case, a rumor was a rumor. For those who had nothing to do with it, who would care about the truth? In Golden Hall, when Gu Yinping heard the rumor, he thought for a moment and instantly understood it. He couldn't help laughing and sighed. Lin Fei wanted to frame Lin Sun, but he probably didn't expect that Lin Sun's counterattack would be so fierce. Instead, he made trouble for himself. Gu Yang was surprised to hear this. Is it Lin Sun who instigated this incident? It's a bit extreme. Although it seems that he won, the students of Donglin School and the forces behind them will inevitably see Lin Sun as a thorn in their side, which will do more harm than good. Gu Yinping praised. Liang, it's really rare for you to think of this. But if you were Lin Sun, what would you do to resolve the crisis? Gu Yang immediately understood that his father was testing him. He thought quickly and said, if it were me, I would definitely not fight with those playboys. At worst, I would avoid them first and settle accounts with them one by one later. Gu Yinping nodded and said, although your method is conservative, it can be considered as the most appropriate method. However, you've overlooked a problem. Those young masters are domineering and arrogant. If they want to cause trouble for you, you won't be able to avoid it at all. After a pause, he continued, so, although Lin Sun's approach is a little extreme, it is the wisest choice to solve this problem. Only by making it known to the whole city. The enemy can only bear it even if they hate Lin Sun's guts and dare not retaliate in a short time. Otherwise, the rumor today will be confirmed to be true, which is extremely unfavorable to their reputation. Even if these forces in Donglin Town do all kinds of bad things in the dark, they still care about their reputation and reputation in the town. Gu Yang frowned and said, but what about after that? When the storm calms down and no one pays attention to it, how can those forces hold back from attacking Lin? After that, Gu Yang was stunned, and then he realized something. He clapped his hands and said excitedly, I understand now. Lin Sun doesn't intend to stay in Donglin Town at all. After passing the county test, he will definitely participate in the state test. In this case, no matter how big the trouble today is, as long as he leaves, who could do anything to him? Gu Yinping praised with a smile. Yes, this is Lin Sun's decision. You have grown up since you can think of this. Gu Yang felt a little ashamed and shook his head. Compared with Lin Sun, this is nothing. Gu Yinping sighed with emotion. Lin Sun is so wise at such a young age. People like him can't be compared at all. Gu Yang suddenly said, Father, if Lin Sun leaves, it will be very difficult for Golden Hall to get some spiritual weapons made by the mysterious spiritual tattooist. Gu Yinping seemed to have thought about this problem and said seriously, Liang, a real chamber of commerce will not place all its hopes on others. If you want to become a famous commercial cultivator, you must have the strength and capital to stand on your own in the world. Gu Liang was shocked. He took a deep breath and said, I see. Gu Yinping smiled and said, Of course, you and Lin Sun are about the same age, and you have a good relationship now. If he has any difficulties in the future, you might as well help him several times. The so-called friends also need to be managed. Don't accept passively, but learn to take the initiative to give. Gu Liang nodded. He really admired Lin Sun now and was eager to become close friends with such a person. But Gu Liang also had his own ideas. He would not maintain the relationship with Lin Sun with interests, but would use real strength and power to make Lin Sun really approve of him. Gu Liang was 15 years old this year. He was a young man, full of vigor and pride in his heart. Keystone business. Hearing the news from Wang Lin, Mu Wansu's expression became more and more strange. Finally, she couldn't help giggling, which added a lot of charm to her delicate and clear face. The more she laughed, the more she couldn't stop. She laughed so hard that her tears almost flowed down. After a long time, she bit her red lips and said, Lin Sun is really bad. He actually slandered a young man and wanted to rape an old woman. How could he think of this? After a pause, she suddenly frowned and said, Does he do this because he has decided to leave Donglin town? Wang Lin said with some regret, Yes. As soon as he leaves, I'm afraid it will be impossible for us to make friends with the mysterious spiritual tattooist in the future. Mu Wansu was in a trance. Normally, if Lin Sun left, she would only applaud and celebrate, hoping that the little bastard would disappear as soon as possible. But when it was really going to happen, Mu Wansu suddenly had a trace of inexplicable disappointment in her heart, which made her feel quite uncomfortable. A little bastard who made her suffer again and again suddenly left one day, which made her feel inexplicably upset. What on earth was she upset about? Mu Wansu frowned. After a long time, she gently bit her red lips and whispered, Humph. Even if he leaves, the thing between us is not over. One day, I'll definitely teach you a lesson, you little bastard. After saying this, she saw Wang Lin's puzzled expression and suddenly came to her senses. She was a little disinterested and didn't even care about the mysterious spiritual tattooist. She waved her hand and said, You can leave now. Wang Lin cupped his hands and left with puzzlement. Clan of Wu. Looking at the message in his hand, Wu Chaochuan, the patriarch, took a deep breath and his face changed slightly. What a vicious little bastard. He even learned to incite public anger and make a false accusation. Wu Chaochuan felt lucky that the clan of Wu had restrained themselves these days and didn't deal with Lin Sun. Otherwise, if they were involved in today's event, they would lose face greatly. Patriarch, this little bastard's action is too extreme and resolute. He has completely offended many forces. This is undoubtedly good news for us. Someone said, Wrong. Wu Chaochuan's eyes flickered and he said coldly, Tomorrow is the county test. Do you think this little bastard will still stay in Donglin town to wait for death after passing the county test? Since he dares to do such a thing so unscrupulously, it is obvious that he has made up his mind to leave. That explains it. We can't let this little bastard leave like this. Otherwise, where we put our Wu family's face? Yes, we are forbearing now, just to deal with him later. But if he leaves, what's the use of forbearing? Everyone in the hall was anxious. Wu Chaochuan took a deep breath and stood up, saying, Don't worry, everyone. I will pay a visit to the dean of Donglin School later. Isn't that little bastard going to take the county test? I will make him go back in failure. He won't pass the test so easily. Donglin School. Lian Fei and Yao Susu stood in a long corridor. At the end of the corridor was the office of the dean. Lian Fei's face was gloomy. Thinking of what had happened in front of the school gate just now, he was so angry that his heart almost convulsed. It was too cruel. Lin Sun's false accusation not only made Lian Fei lose face, but also his reputation was greatly affected. Even if he tried to explain, no one would believe him. This was the terrible thing about rumors. Just like now, The teenager who was accused of wanting to defile an old woman was suddenly given the nickname Crazy Old Lover, which caused a sensation in the whole school. It was extremely vicious. The only comfort was that there was no direct evidence to prove that all this was instigated by Lin Fei. But now the instructors in the school had found out that Yang Kun and others were bewitched by Yao Susu, which indirectly led to what happened today. Lin Fei couldn't help but look at Yao Susu, who looked calm and didn't seem to worry about any punishment at all. Yao Susu even comforted Lin Fei. Don't take it too hard. Lin Sun is too vicious and cunning. I won't let him go if I have a chance. Lin Fei smiled bitterly and didn't know what to say. At this time, the door at the end of the corridor was pushed open, and a dignified middle-aged man in a purple robe came out. Yu Songlin, the dean of Donglin School. Lin Fei's whole body stiffened and his expression tightened. Yu Songlin, a famous overmatch of Sea Spirit Realm, was one of the few overmatches of Sea Spirit Realm in Donglin Town. When he and Yao Susu were asked to wait here together this time, he was wondering whether the dean would punish him in person since this matter had alarmed him. If so, the consequences would be too serious. So seeing Yu Songlin appear at this moment, Lin Fei couldn't help feeling anxious. However, to everyone's surprise, Yu Songlin, who had always been known as old-fashioned, serious in the academy, waved his hand to Suli with a smile. Susu, come here quickly. Your father is waiting for you. Lin Fei opened his eyes wide and was a little confused. Yao Susu seemed to have expected all this. She nodded with a smile and dragged Lin Fei to the hall at the end of the corridor. From the beginning to the end, Yu Songlin looked at them with a smile and didn't stop them at all, which made Lin Fei more shocked and finally realized the problem. It seemed that Yu Songlin acted like this because of Yao Susu's father. Then who was Yao Susu's father? Lin Fei tried his best to think about it. At the moment when he walked into the hall, a name that was very popular in Donglin Town recently suddenly appeared in his mind. Yao Tuahai. Chapter 97. When he walked out of the hall, Lin Fei's back was soaked with cold sweat. Although the conversation with Yao Tuahai had lasted less than a quarter of an hour, it allowed Lin Fei to feel the oppressive force of a powerhouse. Yao Tuahai looked elegant and gentle. He sat casually without any disdain, but when facing Lin Sun, he felt like an ant looking up at a towering mountain. That was the invisible coercion produced when one's cultivation reached a certain level, which was beyond Lin Fei's ability to resist and resolve. Are you all right? Yao Susu asked with concern. Lin Fei shook his head and forced a smile. His face was slightly pale. I didn't expect that your father is His Excellency Yao Tuahai. It really surprised me. Yao Susu said casually, I never hid it from you, but you never asked me. Lin Fei smiled bitterly. Thinking of the conversation with Yao Tuahai just now, his heart was pounding with ecstasy. If he could marry Yao Susu in the future, wouldn't he be able to soar to the sky with the help of Yao Tuahai? Are you telling the truth just now? Yao Susu suddenly asked. Lin Fei was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately responded with a firm look. Susu, if I can't avenge my father's death in person, how can I be worthy of you? In the conversation just now, Yao Tuahai had said frankly that he had learned about the hatred between Lin Fei and Lin, and made it clear that he would not help Lin Fei. Lin Fei was more direct. He swore in front of Yao Tuahai that he would avenge his father with his own hands, which won a little appreciation from Yao Tuahai. Yao Susu nodded and said, although my father won't avenge you directly, you should also know that with the power of our Yao family, he can certainly give you all kinds of help. Don't waste this opportunity. You must cheer up and strive for my father's approval. Lin Fei took a deep breath and said solemnly, Susu, don't worry. I will not only win Uncle Yao's approval, but also marry you. Yao Susu smiled sweetly and said no more. Lin Fei was very happy and complacent. With Yao Tuahai as his backer, there was no need to worry about his failure in the future. As for Lin Sun, he was just an ant on the road ahead. When he rose, he could easily crush him to death. Look over there. It seems to be the patriarch of Clan of Wu. Yao Susu suddenly stopped and turned to look into the distance. Lien Fei looked up and saw Yu Songlin, the dean of Donglin School, and a middle-aged man in a black hat walking towards them. The middle-aged man in the black hat was Wu Chaochuan, the patriarch of Clan of Wu. Lien Fei's face turned cold. He did not have a good impression of the Wu clan. Susu, have you finished talking? At this time, Yu Songlin also saw them and walked over with a smile. Yao Susu nodded and saluted. Yes. Lien Fei, you're here as well. Wu Chaochuan greeted her with a smile. His expression was rather amiable. He had just learned a relationship between Lien Fei and Yao Susu from Yu Songlin, and also knew that Yao Susu's father was Yao Tuahai, who was famous in the southwestern province of the empire. Regarding this matter, Wu Chaochuan was also rather surprised. This Lien Fei was simply lucky to actually hug Yao Tuahai's thigh. The affairs of the world were truly unpredictable. Lien Fei's face was a little cold. She just nodded and left with Yao Susu. In an instant, Wu Chaochuan's face became a little gloomy. He secretly gritted his teeth and thought, "What an arrogant boy. If I didn't give you support, how could you be what you are today?" At the same time, Lien Fei secretly sneered. "Wu Chaochuan, you old dog, you want to use me as a tool? You're daydreaming. I have a general understanding of your affairs. With His Excellency Yao Tuahai in person, I believe he will give you a satisfactory answer." At this time, Yu Songlin said in a low voice, "Thank you, brother Yu." Wu Chaochuan smiled and cupped his hands, feeling relaxed. "Don't mention it. Lin Sun has bullied our Donglin school this time. As the dean, I will not tolerate such a rascal to be rampant any longer." Yu Songlin waved his hand and said with disdain. The next morning, Lin got up at the first glimmer of dawn. After washing, he had breakfast with Xia Ji. Today was the day when the county test began, but Lin Sun was as usual, without any excitement or expectation. "Will we leave after the county test?" Xia Ji asked. Lin Sun answered yes, and added after thinking, "Now I have offended many people. Donglin town has become a place of trouble. I must leave as soon as possible." Xia Ji said with a little regret, "In half a month, I can annex all the gangs in the civilian area." Lin Sun was speechless. After breakfast, when Lin was about to go out, Xia Ji suddenly said, "I want to go with you." Lin Sun was stunned. "Are you worried?" Xia Ji nodded, opened her dark crescent eyes, and said seriously, "I feel that those opponents won't let you pass the county test so easily." She also knew what happened in front of Donglin School yesterday, and how big the disturbance Lin Sun made was. Lin Sun said with a smile, "This is the county test, a first-class event in the empire. Who dares to make trouble in the county test? What's more, with Yao Tuahai, such a big shot, no one dares to stop me from participating in the county test." Xia Ji said, "Then I will go and have a look. I have never left the civilian area since I entered Donglin town." Lin Sun's heart softened, and he agreed without hesitation. Indeed, Xia Ji seldom showed up in public. Even when she annexed the gangs in the civilian area, she only took action at night. Now that she proposed to accompany him to Donglin School, how could Lin Sun refuse? Immediately, Lin Sun took Xia Ji's little hand and left home. They walked out of the civilian area and headed for Donglin School. The street was very lively. Even in the early morning, many pedestrians had gathered in the same direction. Today was the day of the county test, a first-class event in Donglin town. It attracted the attention of the whole city, so it was naturally very lively. When Lin Sun arrived at the gate of Donglin School, it was already crowded with people. Inside and outside the school, the scene was quite spectacular. Most of them came to watch the fun, and some were parents and relatives who came to accompany the examinees. Lin Sun took out the token he received when he registered and smoothly entered Donglin School with Xia Ji without any hindrance. Walking along a spacious bluestone road for a while, Lin Sun's field of vision suddenly widened, and a large square that could accommodate 10,000 people appeared. At this time, the square had already been full of figures, almost all of whom were young boys and girls. There were thousands of people, and everyone's face was full of longing and expectation. In front of the square, there was a high platform, which could overlook the whole square. When a county test began, the chief examiner would sit on the high platform in person. At that time, The distinguished guests who came to watch the test would also come to the high platform and accompany the chief examiner. More than 30 meters away from the high platform, there stood 2 stone tablets, each of which was more than 30 meters high, emitting different spiritual fluctuations. The 3 stone tablets were the bone testing tablet, which tested the bone age, and the spiritual realm tablet, which tested the cultivation. When the county test began, the registered practitioners would take the test in front of the 2 stone tablets. Under the watchful eyes of the public, no one could cheat. It was fair and just. "I'll wait for you here." She stopped at the periphery of the square, chose a place, and said quietly. Lin Sun nodded. He trusted Ji very much. The little girl had extraordinary wisdom, and she wouldn't act recklessly on such an occasion. The place where summer solstice stood was a remote corner. The morning breeze blew her clothes. No one would notice that this little girl, who wore a windbreaker and covered her face with a hat, had an unparalleled beauty. She stood there quietly. Lin Sun was the only one in her eyes in the vast world. Seeing Lin Sun's figure gradually walking into the crowded square, Ji's delicate eyebrows frowned, and a trace of inexplicable irritation surged in her heart. Since last night, she had been aware of this irritation. She believed in her intuition, so she deliberately followed Lin Sun here today. She didn't know what would happen today, but no matter what, she must see it with her own eyes. As long as she was with Lin Sun, she was fearless. There was still an hour before the county test, but many practitioners had gathered in the square, and all of them were discussing something. Lin Sun stood alone, looking at the empty seats on the high platform in the distance. He knew clearly that today's county test was the last chance for his opponents to take action. It depended on whether they dared to act recklessly under the watchful eyes of so many people. This was the Empire's county test, a first-class event. Not only in Donglin town, but also in all the major cities in the world would hold the county test on the same day. No one dared to act recklessly at this time. Otherwise, if the higher-ups of the Empire knew about it, they would inevitably be killed. Lin Sun didn't worry about his own safety, but he was a little worried about whether those people would let him pass the test smoothly. After all, there were as many as 9,000 practitioners applying for the county test this time, and only 1,000 would be admitted in the end. If they wanted to target him, as long as the chief examiner found a random reason, he could be eliminated. Would they dare? Lin Sun was not sure. Suddenly, Lin Sun felt something. He turned his head and saw Lian Fei staring at him indifferently in the crowd not far away, with well-concealed hatred and coldness in his eyes. Beside him was Yao Su, who had dressed up nicely. Lin Sun smiled silently and took the initiative to walk up to him, saying, "My friend, we meet again. What I say a few days ago. There must be cause and effect between coincidences. I feel that there is still a lot of unforgettable predestination between us." Lian Fei was slightly stunned. It seemed that he didn't expect Lin Sun would dare to take the initiative to approach him at this time. Immediately, his face darkened and he said, "Really? I don't think so." Yao Su looked at Lin Sun curiously and then smiled gently, saying, "I see that your glabella is dark today and your eyebrows are full of bad luck. I'm afraid that you will be unlucky today." Then, she took Lian Fei's arm and walked forward. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes, looking at their backs, and was lost in thought. Chapter 98. Before long, a group of people appeared on the high platform of the square one after another, which immediately attracted the attention of all the people present. Look at the one in the middle. It must be Yao Tohai, His Excellency Yao, who is well known in the Southwest and highly valued by the Prime Minister. 30 years ago, His Excellency Yao passed the county test, state test, and province test within 1 year. His peerless demeanor is really a model for our generation. Yes, it is said that His Excellency Yao now has the lofty cultivation of Tao Insight Realm. In the whole empire, he can be regarded as a top figure with real strength. Look, even Yu Lin, the president of Donglin School, Wu Chaochuan, the patriarch of clan of Wu, Mu Wansu, the Black Rose of Keystone Business, and other big shots can only accompany His Excellency Yao. What is power? This is it. On the square, more than 9,000 disciples who participated in the county test were all talking about it with excitement. Lin Sun looked up and saw an elegant man sitting in the center of the high platform. He wore a black wide-sleeved robe with 3 strands of willow whiskers under his chin, looking like an immortal. Sitting there casually, he gave people a kind of invisible majesty of connecting with the sky and looking down on the world. His eyes seemed indifferent and gentle, but a casual glance revealed a heart-palpitating deterrent. This was Yao Tuahai. As early as 30 years ago, he had become famous in the nation test of the empire. In today's southwest province of the empire, only Governor Lu Wujuan could compare with him. Tao Insight Realm. I really don't know what terrible power such a strong man has. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. The more he cultivated, the more he understood the difficulty of cultivation. It was like climbing a mountain with bare hands. Each mountain was higher and more dangerous than the other. It was lucky for ordinary practitioners to be able to enter the gang spirit realm in this life, not to mention the higher mysterious realms such as Sea Spirit and Tao Insight Realm. At the same time, Lin Sun also noticed Wu Chaochuan of the clan of Wu. He was a middle-aged man with an honest face and a black hat on his head. He looked ordinary, but the more ordinary he was, the more people felt he was not simple. It was a symbol of his identity to be able to sit on the high platform as a guest of the clan of Wu. Ordinary people were not qualified to sit on the high platform at all. Mu Wansu was also there, but Lin Sun only glanced at her before withdrawing his gaze. Dang! The clear and melodious bell rang over Donglin School, like a signal, announcing the beginning of the county test at this moment. The atmosphere in the square became solemn, and there was absolute silence. Immediately, Yu Tsonglin, the dean of Donglin School, stood up and announced the meaning of county test in a loud and clear voice. Then he briefly explained the rules of county test and led the topic to Yao Tuahai. As the chief examiner this time, Yao Tuahai stood up with a smile and glanced at the audience. He said in a deep voice, "Everyone here is the future pillar of the empire. I hope that you will perform well today and serve the empire as soon as possible so that you can forge your own glorious achievements." His voice was calm and carried a force that instilled reverence in others, and it clearly resounded in every corner of this world. In an instant, thunderous applause rang out. Some boys and girls were so excited that their blood was boiling, but Lin Sun felt a little bored. Such a cliché could only fool those immature children. County test was indeed a first-class event in the empire. But as long as one calmly thought about it, he would know that it was just the most basic level in the empire's assessment. Even if one passed, it only meant that his aptitude was not bad, and it could not be related to glory. In the 34 provinces and countless cities of the empire, countless outstanding talents emerge from the county test every year, but only a small group of people could reach a higher position, and most of the others could only fade into the world. Fortunately, the boring times soon passed. Under the announcement of Yu Tsonglin, the dean of Donglin School, county test really began. The rules of the test were very simple. Every practitioner who participated in the test went up one after another to be examined by the bone-testing steel and the spiritual realm steel, so that the age and cultivation of each practitioner could be measured. Then, according to these two standards, the best 1,000 people could pass the test smoothly, and the others would be eliminated. It was really simple. There was no fighting in the arena, no life-and-death test, and no all kinds of strange test methods. It just tested the age and cultivation. Fang Xuanzhong, 14 years old, Martial Realm Level 2. Lu Gangshan, 15 years old, Martial Realm Level 4. Shi Hong, 11 years old, Martial Realm Level 1. When each practitioner went up to be examined, the result would be announced on the spot. Under the watchful eyes of the public, no one could cheat. The test was very fast. In just a quarter of an hour, more than 300 people had taken the test. The results were also uneven, and there was nothing eye-catching. Lin Sun felt a little bored and calculated in his heart. There were more than 9,300 candidates here. According to the speed of 300 people in a quarter of an hour, it would take 8 hours. At the thought of standing here foolishly for 8 hours, Lin Sun felt helpless. The key was that there were only one bone testing steel and one spiritual realm steel in the whole test site. If there were more, the efficiency would be improved a lot. Unfortunately, Donglin Town was just a remote city on the southwest border of the empire, so it was impossible to have more bone testing steels and spiritual realm steels. Wu Feichong, 9 years old, martial realm level 5. Just when Lin Sun was indulging in flights of fancy, a result caught his attention. Not only Lin Sun, but also the whole audience became restless at the moment. 9 years old, a cultivation at the 5th level of martial realm. He was simply a natural cultivation genius, which was extremely rare. For a capital test like this, there was no need to announce the final result of the test. One would know how outstanding one was, and passing the test was a matter of course. Wu Feichong, it is said that he is a genius born in the clan of Wu. He is born with a strong spiritual power, and the clan of Wu has high hopes for him. It is said that they will train him to be an outstanding spiritual tattooist at all costs. The clan of Wu is lucky. If Wu Feichong grows up, the status of the clan of Wu in Donglin Town will inevitably rise. Discussions broke out everywhere. Even Wu Chaochuan on the high platform was flushed with joy. Wu Feichong was his grandson, and now he could attract the attention of the whole audience, which made him proud. Especially when he heard Yao Tuahai praised him with a smile and said rare. Wu Chaochuan felt more and more comfortable. Well, it turns out that he is from the clan of Wu. If I cripple him, will the clan of Wu suffer a heavy blow? Lin Sun touched his chin thoughtfully. If Wu Chaochuan knew what Lin Sun was thinking, he would immediately kill him. The test went on. Before long, an 11-year-old boy named Xiao Hen and a 10-year-old girl named Yu Miao, respectively at the 7th level of martial realm and the 6th level of martial realm, caused a sensation in the whole audience. Although their aptitude was not as good as Wu Feichong's, they were already top-notch. It was worth mentioning that Xiao Han was the nephew of Xiao Yuanzhong, the current shopkeeper of Treasure Loft. He was sent to Donglin School to cultivate since he was a child. And Yu Miao was the granddaughter of Yu Songlin, the dean of Donglin School. Witnessing all this, Lin Sun was calm. He was very clearly aware that perhaps Wu Feichong, Xiao Hen, and Yu Miao's natural endowments weren't bad indeed. But most importantly, all three of them had the support of great powers behind them. They'd received the guidance of great masters since a young age and the support of various cultivation resources. So the cultivation education they received was far from something that those disciples from poor backgrounds could compare to. At least until now, the test had been carried out for nearly 4 hours, and more than 4,000 people had been tested, but none of the poor children's names and results had caused a sensation. Lin Sun didn't look down on the poor children. He himself could be counted as coming from a poor family. But he was very clear that even if those poor children had amazing cultivation talents, it was too late when they really started to cultivate due to the lack of cultivation resources, which undoubtedly buried their talents and wisdom. This was the cruelty of the reality. It might be too absolute to say that it was difficult for the poor children to produce talents. But compared with those children from famous families, it was too difficult for the poor children to stand out. After a while, Lin Sun restrained his mind and dared not think more, because it was his turn to take the test. Whoosh! When Lin Sun's figure came to the bone testing steel, which was several meters high, Mu Wansu, who seemed to be bored to death on the high platform, suddenly sat up straight and looked at the steel with a hint of complexity in her beautiful eyes. Noticing Mu Wansu's action, many bigwigs of Donglin Town on the high platform were also secretly guessing whether this young boy had something to do with Keystone business. Wu Chaochuan, who knew Lin Sun's background, narrowed his eyes, and an imperceptible coldness flashed in the depth of his eyes. He thought to himself, "Little guy, no matter how good your performance is, you can't escape this time." As for Yu Songlin and Yao Tuahai, they didn't have any reaction. At the same time, in the square, Lin Fei and Yao Susu also looked over. Lin Fei's face was gloomy, while Yao Susu's lips were curved into an intriguing sneer. In a remote corner farther away from the square, Xia Ji, who hadn't raised her head since the beginning of the test, suddenly raised her clear eyes and looked at Lin Sun from afar. But soon, a familiar irritation rose uncontrollably in her heart, which made her subconsciously move her eyes to the other side. It was the gate of Donglin School, which was empty. At this moment, except for some guards who maintained order, there was no one worth paying attention to. A wisp of bewilderment couldn't help but arise in Xia Ji's eyes, and she frowned. Lin Sun didn't notice all this. He stepped forward and took the test in front of the bone-testing steel and the spiritual realm steel one by one, and then returned to the square. He looked calm from beginning to end, and didn't look at the high platform at all. Lin Sun, 13 years old, the 6th level of martial realm. However, as soon as the test result was announced, many exclamations broke out in the square. Chapter 99. There were not many surprised and doubtful voices, which were scattered in different areas of the square. All this could only prove that Lin Sun, at the age of 13, had reached the 6th level of martial realm, which was not outstanding at all. It was just a little higher than the average, so it didn't cause any big uproar and sensation. But those who knew Lin Sun's name couldn't keep calm at this time, not because of Lin Sun's outstanding performance in the examination, but because of his name. For most of the people present, Lin Sun was just a strange symbol, but for those who knew Lin Sun made many of them feel abhorrence and hatred. Just like at this time, those surprised voices came from Yang Kun and his fellows. They, the playboys of Donglin Town, were captured by Xia Ji yesterday and escorted to the gate of Donglin School, becoming the most miserable clowns in the farce. How could they not hate Lin Sun? At the same time, Yu Songlin, the president of Donglin School, suddenly raised his head and thoughtfully looked at Lin Sun's back, who was returning to the square. He thought of the conversation he had with Wu Chaochuan, the patriarch of clan of Wu yesterday. Soon, he thought of the disturbance that happened in front of Donglin School yesterday. He couldn't help frowning and falling into contemplation. Yu Songlin didn't notice that Yao Tuahai, who was beside him, also glanced at Lin Sun's back at this moment. Yao Tuahai still looked calm, but there was a trace of doubt in his heart. How could a young man on the 6th level of martial realm make his daughter and Lien Fei suffer losses in his hands? The corner of Wu Chaochuan's eyes twitched imperceptibly. He clearly remembered that Lin Sun was only on the 5th level of martial realm when he entered Donglin Town a month ago. Who would have thought that he had broken through the realm in just 1 month? Such a young man with potential, scheming, and resourcefulness was bound to be a big disaster in the future once he grew up. Wu Chaochuan had the intention to kill Lin Sun, but he didn't show it on the surface. Mu Wansu's expression was more complicated. If she remembered correctly, when she met Lin for the first time in Feiyan Village, he was only at the 3rd level of martial realm. It was with the help of Shi Xuan's wine of 4 seasons that he had an epiphany and stepped into the 4th level of martial realm. Only a few months had passed, but he had already reached the 6th level of martial realm. Such a rapid progress shocked Mu Wansu. For the first time, she realized that she didn't realize that this boy had an excellent talent in cultivation because she only cared about gains and losses with Lin before. Lin Sun didn't seem to notice all this. He returned to his original position and kept silent, looking down at the ground. He didn't have to guess to know that when his name resounded, it was like a strand of blood that would instantly attract the attention of those latent hungry wolves. However, Lin Sun was not worried that they would make trouble in the county test. Sure enough, as Lin Sun speculated, his appearance didn't cause any trouble. The county test was still going on. One after another, boys and girls took the test with excitement, expectation, and nervousness, got the results, and then returned to their original places. In the face of the test results, some people were happy, some people lamented, and some people were uncertain. When it was close to noon, all the tests of more than 9,300 people came to an end, but the final result of the county test hadn't come out yet. No one left. Compared with the waiting and boredom just now, the atmosphere in the square became tense and depressing at this moment. Everyone raised their spirits and looked at the high platform in the distance. Their faces were full of desire, tension, and expectation. The final result of the test was about to be announced. Who would be eliminated and who would be admitted would be revealed at this moment. On the high platform, the main examiner, Yao Tuahai, did not let anyone wait for long. He stood up and swept his gaze across the entire audience, saying, "This time's class test has opened my eyes, and I have discovered many good seedlings in cultivation. Unfortunately, the final result of the test is only 1,000 people. I hope that those young friends who failed do not be discouraged and continue to work hard and can participate in the test again next year. And those young friends who passed the test, do not be arrogant and complacent. You all must know that the class test is only the first step. In the future, you all will face many challenges." After speaking eloquently for a long time, Yao Dahai's expression became solemn as he instructed in a deep voice, "Fellow Tsonglin, you will announce the results of the capital exam this time." As he said, he handed a scroll that had been written long ago to Yu Tsonglin beside him. Yu Tsonglin was refreshed and accepted the order with a smile. But when he stood up and opened the scroll, his expression suddenly became dignified and solemn, and his eyes were like lightning. In this test, those who are under the age of 15 and whose cultivation is lower than the 5th level of martial realm will be eliminated. Those who are under the age of 14 and whose cultivation is lower than the 4th level of martial realm will be eliminated. Those who are under the age of 13 and whose cultivation is lower than the 3rd level of martial realm will be eliminated. Those who are under the age of 12 and whose cultivation is lower than the 2nd level of martial realm will be eliminated. His speech was neither too fast nor too slow, but every word was like thunder, shaking the square. Especially the word eliminated, which shocked many boys and girls present and made it difficult for them to calm down. Those boys and girls who were directly declared to fail the county test were even more pale, with bitter and unwilling expressions. Many of them even couldn't help crying on the spot. Crying did indeed seem very comical. It was easy for others to ridicule them. However, it also proved that those young men and young women were really only children that had never experienced the affairs of the world. If it was an experienced adult in their place, then no matter how unwilling they were in their hearts, they would probably not cry in public. Now, let's ask those who failed the test to leave the square, Yu Tsonglin said in a low voice. At this time, the scene in the square was full of wailing, which was very easy to cause chaos. If those who failed were not allowed to leave, when they heard the list of those who passed the test, they would be unwilling and cause some turmoil. Soon, more than 7,000 people left in disappointment and disappeared from the square. Many people felt pity for them, because among the 7,000 or so cultivators who failed, some people's results could be considered pretty good. If it was in the previous county tests, they could easily pass. Regrettably, this year's class test was different. Because of Yao Tuahai, the number of practitioners participating in the class test had skyrocketed. Many practitioners from other cities had also flooded in, causing the competition to become even crueler and harsher than before. Lin Sun didn't feel much about this, but at this moment, he couldn't help but have some doubts in his heart. The result of the test had been announced. How could those guys not take action? Of course, it would be better if they were willing to see him pass the county test smoothly. But Lin Sun didn't think that would happen. At this time, there were more than 2,000 boys and girls in the square. In other words, more than 1,000 people would be eliminated in the following time. Before long, Yu Tsonglin said again, "Now there are more than 2,000 people in the square. Most of you are of the same age and cultivation, so it's really difficult to make a choice. For the sake of fairness, His Excellency Yao Tuahai has decided to have another test." Another test. The whole square was in an uproar. No one had expected that another test would be carried out at the most critical moment, which was so rare. In the previous county tests of the Empire, such a situation had occurred, and the final candidates were determined through the additional test. But in Donglin Town, it was the first time that the county test was held with an additional test. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and suddenly had a feeling that this additional test might not be peaceful for him. Of course, before the additional examination, I will announce a list of names. The Shouja whose names appear on the list are all people with outstanding results. Based on their performance, There's no need for the additional examination, and they can directly pass the capital examination. Yu Songlin's words made the whole square burst into an uproar again. But thinking about it, it was fair. Practitioners like Wu Feichong, Yu Miao, and Xiao Hen, who had top test scores and caused a sensation in the whole square, could definitely pass the county test smoothly. It was meaningless to carry out the additional test for them, and it would be a waste of time. After the uproar, all the people on the scene couldn't help holding their breath and looking forward, hoping that their names would appear on the list and they wouldn't have to take the additional test. Soon, Yu Songlin began to announce the list. Wu Feichong, Yu Miao, Xiao Hen. The names were announced one by one. There were more than 600 people, which caused a burst of exclamations and uproars. Some were envious, and some sighed with disappointment. When he was sure that his name didn't appear on the list, Lin Sun couldn't help sneering in his heart. Sure enough, it was aimed at him. During the county test, just now, Lin Sun seemed to be absent-minded, but in fact he had already kept in mind the names, ages, and cultivations of each practitioner, and roughly determined the level of his performance. At this time, in the list announced by Yu Songlin, many people had the same age and cultivation as Lin Sun. It was abnormal that they could pass the county test, but Lin Sun couldn't. After all, only more than 600 people were announced on the list, and 1,000 people would be admitted in the end. The quota was not full at all. Why couldn't his name appear on the list? Lin Sun didn't expose this, because he knew it was useless to do so. No one on the scene would complain for him. Besides, the list announced by Yu Songlin seemed to be biased, but if it was really investigated, it was not against the rules at all. Because this was not the final list of county test admission, but just a part of it. Yu Songlin had all kinds of reasons to explain all this. In Lin's view, maybe they just wanted to disgust and irritate him so that they would have enough reasons to eliminate and suppress him. Lin Sun wouldn't let them get what they wanted. But to Lin's surprise, although he didn't intend to expose these, someone took the initiative to stand up for him and complain for him. And it was a person who surprised Lin Sun greatly, Mu Wansu. However, when he saw this scene, Lin Sun's heart thumped and he shouted in his heart, "Oh no!" Chapter 100. Mu Wansu obviously noticed something wrong in the list. She pointed it out after a little hesitation. President Yu, Lin Sun seems to meet the requirements. She was polite enough, and she believed that Yu Songlin could understand it. However, after hearing it, Yu Songlin's expression became a little strange. He glanced at Mu Wansu and said in a low voice, "I know." Mu Wansu was stunned. Looking at Yu Songlin's expression, she inexplicably had a bad feeling in her heart. She glanced around with her clear eyes and suddenly found that both Wu Chaochuan and some big shots in Donglin town nearby seemed to have a strange look on their faces. They seemed to be gloating or waiting for this moment for a long time. Mu Wansu's heart sank. She realized that she might not only not help Lin Sun this time, but also cause some trouble for him. Sure enough, the next moment, Yu Songlin became serious and solemn. He said in a low voice, "You must be curious why Lin Sun didn't get into the list of candidates who passed the county test despite his good performance in the assessment." All the big shots on the high platform nodded tacitly. Even Yao Tohai, sitting in the middle, showed a look of listening attentively. On the square, a group of boys and girls who were waiting for the additional test couldn't help but be stunned and felt a little confused. What was wrong with Lin Sun? They didn't understand the reason. But Lin Fei, Yao Susu, Yang Kun, and others all understood it. They became excited at once, glancing at Lin Sun in the crowd with a little complacency, waiting for a good show. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. As he expected, those opponents' revenge had already begun. He didn't blame Mu Wansu, and it was even to the extent that he felt rather pleased when he heard Mu Wansu cry out for him. He knew that, even though she didn't like him, it was already very rare for her to still act in such a way when it came to a major matter of right and wrong. At this time, Yu Songlin had already stood on the high platform and said with awe-inspiring righteousness, "To tell you the truth, although Lin Sun has a good aptitude, he has many stains on him. He not only has bad morals, but also has insidious means and evil intentions. Such a person doesn't deserve to participate in the county test at all." His words were blunt and straightforward. Although there was no dirty word, It was said by Yu Songlin, the president of Donglin School, which seemed more and more aggressive. The crowd was in an uproar. There were not only the bigwigs of Donglin Town who came to watch the test, but also many teachers of the school and more than 2,000 practitioners who participated in the county test. When they heard Yu Songlin's poor evaluation of a teenager, it could be imagined how shocked they were. It must be true. With Yu Songlin's identity and status, did he need to slander a teenager in person? What a sinister method. What an evil heart. If it were not for the inconvenient occasion, Lin Feiji would like to praise loudly. Yu Songlin's words touched his heart and made him excited all over. Yao Susu also had a sweet smile on her face. She said in a low voice, "I've said it before. This guy's glabella is dark today, and his eyebrows are full of killing intent. He must be in big trouble." Lin Feiji couldn't help laughing, feeling very proud. It was the precious words of the president of Donglin School. Lin Sun, a small potato who could only mix in the civilian area, had been sentenced to death on the road of county test. Lin Sun didn't speak, nor did he pay attention to the uproar. He looked at Yu Songlin on the high platform, who abhorred evil as if it were his enemy, and the bigwigs of Donglin Town around him with various expressions. Lin Sun couldn't help hating in his heart. These old bastards were really vicious to put a label on him with these non-existent excuses. Once this kind of evaluation was spread out, Lin Sun would definitely be affected by this evaluation, even if he had the opportunity to participate in the state test in the future. In other words, if Lin Sun couldn't smash this evaluation, he would be ridiculed and sarcastic by others with this evaluation and bear a groundless bad reputation in the future. President Yu, what do you mean? To criticize a Shioja participating in the capital test so harshly in front of everyone, this is not proper. Before Lin Sun could respond, Mu Wansu couldn't help but ask. She had just made a mess, so she wouldn't make the second mistake. But Yu Songlin waved his hand and said, "Miss Wansu, calm down." As he said, he glanced over the audience like lightning and finally fixed his eyes on Lin Sun, saying, "Since I said so, I have enough evidence to prove all this. With my identity, I don't need to frame a young man." The uproar disappeared. Looking at their expressions, they had believed most of it before Yu Songlin took out the evidence. This was the influence. Compared with Lin Sun, who was strange to most people, Yu Songlin was a well-known bigwig in Donglin Town. He was not only the president of Donglin School, but also one of the few strong practitioners in Sea Spirit Realm in the town. Who dared to question what such a bigwig said? "Lin Sun, let me ask you, are you the boss of Shuangmu Gang in the civilian area?" All of a sudden, Yu Songlin shouted like a thunderclap. Shuangmu Gang? Many people on the scene were confused, but some people who knew about this matter were all shocked and spread the news they knew. Soon everyone on the scene understood that Shuangmu Gang was actually an underworld force in the civilian area, and it was quite famous recently. It had annexed more than 10 gangs in succession. Underworld forces like this all did some shady business that couldn't be seen in public. Naturally, there wouldn't be any good people in it. Many people on the scene knew how chaotic and dirty the civilian area was, although they also knew that there were many underworld forces there. When it was really put in the light, the meaning changed. Under the gaze of the crowd, Lin Sun was silent for a moment and then nodded, yes. There was a commotion on the scene. It seemed that they didn't expect that Lin Sun would admit it. Didn't this confirm the comments of President Yu Songlin just now? Even Yu Songlin didn't expect that Lin Sun would admit it without any nonsense, which really surprised him. But soon he didn't think more about it. In his view, Lin Sun was still too young. At this moment, Lin Sun's reaction was completely shocked by his power and didn't dare to resist anymore. Then let me ask you again. Yesterday, was it also you who secretly instigated those underworld members to make trouble in front of the Donglin School? Yu Songlin shouted again, his eyes like lightning, and his power became more and more oppressive, as if he was judging a prisoner. Many people who didn't know the truth before couldn't help bursting into an uproar again. The farce in front of the Donglin School yesterday had spread all over Donglin Town. Who could think that it was a teenager who instigated it? If it was true, Didn't it mean that the farce was actually a conspiracy? At this moment, Lin Sun didn't look flustered. He looked straight at Yu Songlin on the high platform and said, yes. Seeing Lin Sun admit it again, even Mu Wansu couldn't sit still at this moment. She was very anxious. This little bastard used to be so cunning and treacherous. Why did he suddenly wilt today? Didn't he know that once he admitted it, he wouldn't be able to walk out of the Donglin school today, let alone pass the county test? On the high platform, Mu Wansu was so confused that she didn't know what to do. All the people present were big shots in Donglin town. Even if she had keystone business behind her, it was impossible for her to control the current situation. Compared with Mu Wansu, Wu Chaochuan beside her looked serious, but his eyes were full of gloating complacency. After all, Lin Sun was too young to be a match for these old guys. At this moment, Yu Songlin withdrew his eyes from Lin Sun and said in a low voice, everyone, now you understand why I said that just now, right? That's why I refused to put his name in the list of passing the county test. On the high platform, all the big shots of Donglin town nodded. Yao Tuahai, sitting in the center, didn't say anything, but his silence showed that he had acquiesced. At this time, Yu Songlin suddenly sighed with emotion and said, originally, His Excellency Yao and I planned to let him participate in the next additional test for the sake of his young age and the chance to turn over a new leaf in the future. If he performed well, we might give him a chance. But it's a pity that even if I want to take care of him now, I'm afraid many people present won't agree. A strong disgust rose in Mu Wansu's heart. It was obvious that Yu Songlin had calculated all this, but he pretended to be righteous, which was too hypocritical. She really didn't expect that the dean of Donglin School was such a person. But no matter what Mu Wansu thought, as soon as Yu Songlin's words fell, there was a burst of excitement in the audience. Absolutely not. He's wicked and filthy. We absolutely can't let him participate in the county test. Right? Such an evil thief is so vicious at such a young age. When he grows up, I'm afraid he will poison the whole country and bring disaster to the world. Not only can he not be allowed to participate in the county test, but also such a thief should be arrested and severely punished as a warning to others. Young people were always easy to be incited, especially when they targeted at people who had nothing to do with them. They became more and more unscrupulous. Angry curses were heard all over the place. Those boys and girls participating in the county test in the square all stayed away from Lin Sun, seeming to be ashamed to be associated with him and abhorred evil. In such a large open space, only Lin Sun's figure was left. Seeing this scene, Mu Wansu had a sense of helplessness. She sighed in her heart. Why did Lin Sun become so stupid today? Who could believe that it was just a coincidence that the county test turned into such a situation? It must have been carefully arranged. Couldn't Lin Sun, who had shown his wisdom in the past, see it? Lien Fei laughed excitedly, and Yao Susu also threw out her chest, proud and complacent. The result gave them a sense of satisfaction and catharsis. On the high platform, Wu Chaochuan and Yu Songlin looked at Lin Sun as if they were staring at a dead man. Yao Tuahai still said nothing, and his mind was unpredictable. On the square, the crowd was indignant, and the curses and accusations were still echoing.